Hello, 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 my ever so patient law nerds. It is a mobile stream. And sometimes the tech fights with me when I mobile stream because my mobile setup is always a little different because ADHD is a gift. And so my mobile setup is always slightly different depending on what I've remembered or forgotten when I am traveling. But today there is a massive and long Kohberger hearing coming out of Idaho. What you know about Idaho is that Idaho doesn't play, right? They will not let these be streamed. So they are not simulcast. They are recorded and released later. So this happened in court today. I have not looked at what happened in court today. I'm going to tell you about what motions are on calendar today, what the big ones are, and then we're just going to jump into this hearing. I'm going to try to put it on 1.25 so we can get through this a little bit. The lawyers talk at a more moderate pace than some others. So I think if we speed up the court proceeding a little bit, we can get all the way through these hearings before I have a hard stop today. So fingers crossed that everything works for us. Fingers crossed that all of the tech works with us. And we're just going to law nerd it out together today and go through these court hearings. I don't know if the judge rules on these. No spoilers in the chat, please. I don't know if the judge rules on these or takes these under submission. But let's talk about the things that I am most looking forward to hearing for today. And then we will go from there. So with all of that, law nerds, we are ready to roll. I am so excited to see you. So chat. We'll talk all the things about traveling on Tuesday. We'll talk about Brittany's, the divorce filings and stuff on Tuesday. We have lots to talk about on Tuesday. But today we are just doing Kohberger hearings. If there are questions that come in, super chat, member chat, or otherwise not on Kohberger, please forgive me, but I am not going to get to those today. We are going to only do Kohberger stuff today because otherwise we are going to run out of time. So it is Friday, August 18th. I appreciate all of you. We've got to roll. I want to hear what happens in these court hearings. So I'm going to roll the intro. I'm going to tell you what we're covering and we're just going to do it. I've got a lot of water here, so I am ready to rock. Let's go.
Hey there, I'm Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst, breaking down the legal side of the pop culture and entertainment stories we can't stop talking about. I'm a big fan of the cursey words. I've been a licensed attorney for over 17 years, but this is not legal advice. This is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not... Let's get into it.
Other things we're not covering today. Today, we are just covering Kohberger. We are not talking about Netflix. We are not talking about Depp v. Heard. We are not talking about sidebars. We are not talking about Brittany. Only these motions. These motions. There are like 6 of them on calendar. Some of them are connected, so I think the court will just combine some of it. What I'm most interested to see is what happens with the stay. So just for like road so far-ish-ness, with the stay, the prosecution has asked the court to reconsider the 37-day stay, and the prosecution was like, hey, we think this is the defendant waiving time. Like, Your Honor, I don't think you can do that. So could you like reconsider? This is like less successful generally than asking a parent to reconsider when they've said, no, you can't spend the night at your friend's house. Asking for a motion to reconsider is often a losing proposition. So saying, hey, Your Honor, I know that you said this, but I'd sure love it if you changed your mind. That really doesn't often happen. So I'm not incredibly encouraged that the court's going to change their mind on the prosecution's objection to the 37-day stay. Kohberger and the defense have asked for another stay. They're like, the prosecution has been up to all of this nonsense, and we don't want to waive time. They could waive the speedy trial. They don't want to waive their 6-month speedy trial, but they also want the court to give them more time because they want to fight over the grand jury. So the defense also has a motion for another stay. So they got a 37-day stay and they want another stay, but they don't want to waive time. And the prosecution is like, that's not what we're doing. Then you have a motion with regard to the grand jury proceedings. The defense is arguing that the standard for grand juries is just like wrong everywhere, and that the court should like rewrite all of the law. That's not going anywhere. That motion is DOA. It's literally not doing anything. They made the motion, they tried, they preserved it for appeal, but what's not going to happen is the entire standard for grand jury is going to get redone. They said that the standard for grand jury should be beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard for grand juries all across the United States is probable cause. It's not synonymous, but it's at the same stage of the proceedings as a preliminary hearing. It's just a different way to get a probable cause determination. So arrest and charge, probable cause determination, move to trial. So they're arguing about the grand jury. It is a tedious and exhausting motion that was written like a piece of academic work, not like legal advocacy. I had thoughts. We've gone through them. We don't need to do it again. But anyway, I don't think that motion's going anywhere. I don't expect to see a ton of argument on it. The motion I think we're going to see a lot of argument about and witnesses on is the DNA. The argument over DNA is about the IgG DNA, and I'm not going to get into I'm going to bang this stand my computer's on. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it because we're going to hear witnesses on it. Here's the quickest rundown I can give and still be accurate. The way that familial DNA is built out is what the defense is arguing over before they get to Kohberger being arrested, cheek swab matching the DNA off of the button on the knife sheath. This is the step before that. And the step before that is, how did they build a profile with unknown DNA and take the unknown DNA and then back that up to figure out who might be the familial DNA and then go into the dad's trash and then pull trash from the dad's house and then do search warrants and stuff. This could be a problem with fruit of the poisonous tree, which is if the DNA match or profiles were obtained improperly, illegally, in violation of the Fourth Amendment, it can taint, I know, our legally favorite word, it can taint everything downstream. So it's like, if it's bad at the tree, then the fruit is also poison. So it's like, could they try to get all the DNA excluded? Well, maybe, maybe not, but it depends on the information about the IgG DNA, and they're asking for more information about how law enforcement got that first step to see if there's a further step that they need to argue with. So they're trying to get back all the way up to step one and compel the prosecution to turn that information over. The prosecution has not turned that information over because the prosecution in all of their motions have been like, we don't really have anything else. So like, like that's my summary of the prosecution's motion. The prosecution would take issue that my summary is they're like, we don't have anything else. But that's really what they're saying. The FBI is like, I don't know what you're talking about. We did these things. We figured out who it was. We narrowed it down. And then we have no other records. That's a problem. And that's what the defense is arguing over. Salty and Sweet asked a great question. They got a cheek swab. Isn't the rest moot? Not if the thing that led them to arrest Kohberger to get the cheek swab was done in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And these are building blocks. And the defense is trying to attack the bottom building block. But was there other evidence? I'm not saying that all of this DNA is getting thrown out. Please don't misunderstand me with that. I'm saying that this is a defense team attacking the building blocks of the search warrant so they can potentially argue to get things thrown out later, but they need the discovery to attack. So they're asking for all the information so they can attack that information to try to get the DNA thrown out. The defense's best bet in this case is to try to get as much of the DNA evidence thrown out. So it's attacking those foundational building blocks to try to do it. This is their job. This is exactly what you want to see a defense team doing, especially in a death penalty case. You want them to challenge the Fourth Amendment. You want them to make sure that the police did things right. If police are circumventing the rules, then that prosecution's not going to stand. So this is why we're seeing these motions argued. So there was absolutely a crew text sent. I'm not in a bathroom. It's probably echoey like a bathroom. I promise I'm not streaming from a bathroom. I don't put it past myself to stream from a bathroom, but I'm not streaming from a bathroom. That I promise. So with all of that, those are the arguments you're going to be hearing, and we're going to see witnesses today with regard to the DNA mostly. So we'll see that. Can they identify? We're going to see what they argue. Can they identify who the IgG DNA was from? They had the father's DNA, but it's my understanding that they took the DNA from the knife sheath and worked backwards from there, and then that was later confirmed to be Kohberger's DNA. So we're going to go that way. All right, you guys, it's time. We're going to Idaho. So buckle up. Let's go to Idaho. All right, we are starting with Court TV's feed. Look, there have been like 3 different parts of this hearing. You guys, this has been chopped up by every different news outlet in different ways. We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. I will double check on the text crew once we get started. I sent it. Text didn't make it, but email did and IG did. Let me go double check why the text didn't go out. A huge thank you to Miguelina for that bumper. She's fantastic. And we're going to start with the first part and then go from there. I will go, let me in small in myself and big in. Let me make myself a little smaller so you guys can see Kohberger. And we are rolling with the Court TV coverage first, and then we'll go from there. So some of you got the text. See, this is why we are working on a solution that is not dependent on anyone else. And the way I cannot wait to launch this for you guys is it's literally killing me to not be able to talk about it yet. Okay, we are working on a solution.
All right. So if I'm understanding your question there,
the background noise in this particular courtroom makes me rageful. There is nothing I can do about it. They are just at the beginning of this hearing. I'm going to put this at 1.25 because we're going to try to get through this the best that we can. I've got the volume all the way up. I'm going to do my best. I don't have my full setup today, so we're going to do the best we can.
Assertion that we're talking about 3 potential analysis of DNA that was not provided to you, but that has no connection to Mr. Kohberger.
Correct.
Any response?
Your Honor, we didn't realize this was going to be an issue today. We have given the defense everything that we received from.
I don't know how this hearing is starting in the middle in every single one. I have no idea how this is starting in the middle, but the defense is like, we are arguing about the DNA, and the prosecution is like, hey, we gave you everything. And you guys, I am checking the text. It says it went out, but we have been having issues carrier by carrier. So some carriers get them slower than others. All right, let's keep going. Oh, I need to do it this way.
In the lab, they'd asked for DNA workups on other people. To the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done. We can't produce something that doesn't exist. We provide everything. There's one outstanding lab report that relates to the forensic examination by the lab personnel of crime.
I'm going to send another text.
That's the only outstanding lab report. Everything else, along with all the notes, is what there is, and it's been provided to the defense. And if they're hoping that there's something else there, it's not there.
Taylor?
Well, Your Honor, it's part of our third motion to compel. It's still something that we don't have. We also don't have the unexpected corrective actions, unexpected results from the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab for the 6 months before and the 6 months after November 13th, 2022. We did get some, but it's a narrow scope, and we asked for the full year, 6 months before and 6 months after. That's also in our motion to compel.
I understand your responsibility is to turn over every rock, but you can't get things that don't exist as well. So
The court is saying you can't get things that you don't have, but it's the prosecution's obligation to turn over every rock. So they are arguing, hey, you need to turn it over. The prosecution's like, we've turned everything over. The sound on this hearing is absolutely horrible, but I'm hoping the closed captioning is good enough that we can at least make it work. So hang in there, y'all. I hate it too.
I mean, there has to be some level of trust in discovery, you're all sworn attorneys. And so
He said you're all sworn attorneys.
one more lab report that is coming your way today, I heard you say.
All right, I sent out a backup
Maybe not
text.
today. We were waiting to receive it so that we can process it for discovery. It's supposed to be in any time.
Okay, I misunderstood that, so.
The-
It's coming soon. It has to come
The
soon
prosecution is waiting on one more report to turn over on the IgG DNA.
weeks away from the trial. So we're going to be very rushed about a lot of things, but I'm going to talk about that a little more. So what about the other claim, Mr. Thompson? Do you want to address that? The other mistakes?
Corrective action log, unexpected result log. We have that in part, but not the full code.
I don't know what exists that we haven't received. We provided all the requests to the lab, and they've assured us that they have provided us with everything they have within the scope of those requests. I'm not sure what else to say. I mean, we can make a supplemental inquiry to clarify that after we finish the report today. But I'm kind of sitting there saying, Judge was giving me everything we know to exist.
Well, that would be wise to check on that.
We will.
Because we don't want.
The prosecution is saying to the court, I have turned over everything I have. Here's the obligation for the prosecution. They have to turn over everything they have and everything law enforcement has, even if law enforcement hasn't given it to them yet. So the prosecution is responsible for things they might not know exist. And that's what they're dealing with right now, with the court saying, okay, well, check again, ask the lab again. It will happen, I can't say if it's common or not common, it will happen that the prosecution will be like, so, Your Honor, I asked my law enforcement for everything. They told me I had everything, but now we've discovered that they didn't give me everything. It is a struggle of the prosecution. It is a fight between prosecution and law enforcement, and it is something that the prosecution can end up getting in trouble for. So in a case like this, I would expect the prosecution to try to sit down with the labs physically and go page by page and ask for it. They can't do that with the FBI. So that's going to get harder. And so they're saying, we think we've turned over everything. And the judge is like, please check again, please check again, please check again. So that's what they're talking about.
Want this to come back on the eve of.
We don't want this to come back on appeal. Yep.
Years from now at an appeal.
Yes, sir.
Nobody
I wanna
does.
make sure
Nobody
we
wants
have
that.
combed through all information that has any bearing or argument.
Slow mode is on.
Bearing on this case. That's all I'm.
Ms. Jennings is making a note right now. We'll send the inquiry out later today. Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, just for quick clarification, we also ask for all emails, text messages, electronic messages, or other messages. Some have been provided, but we don't have assurance that that's all. And so for the same reason, we want to make sure that we have the complete file.
Okay, Mr. Thompson.
We have told them, we have given them everything that we know to exist. We've asked the lab provided it to us, we sent it to them. At this point, all I'm hearing is speculation, is they think maybe or they wish something else was there. But as far as we know, it doesn't exist. I don't know what else we can say.
These attorneys were real patient a few months ago. The patience is fucking gone. Look, Santa Claus prosecutor has been generally very, very congenial. This is not going well today. Today, this prosecutor is pissed, and you can hear it in his voice. He is tired of the defense saying, well, Your Honor, we don't have it. He's like, we have given you legitimately everything that we have. And all we're hearing is you saying, well, we've asked for everything and we don't think they've given it to us. He's like, based on what though? Based on your feelings? This can't be based on feelings. So the prosecution's now saying this is based on pure speculation. We have given you everything. And the prosecution does not like the insinuation that they have not turned over everything. So they are now starting to get real spicy. But again, the defense has a job to do. The prosecution is taking personal umbrage to it because it's like we are now a snake eating its tail. We have been over this and over this and over this and over this. Lori and CT, how would they know what they don't have? Right. They say they've turned everything over, and you go through the police files yourself as a prosecutor and make sure everything's turned over. And there's nothing that's a surprise, especially in a case like this. And I'm sure that they've done that. And they're like, we can't turn over shit that doesn't exist. So what else would you like? But the defense is doing their job and protecting their case for appeal. And that's what they're going to do, this whole thing.
Can't respond to something that's...
Your Honor, I can't do my assignment if she didn't do hers. We're supposed to be talking about Haiti,
Yes, sir.
and she's talking about a dinner party.
Is shared.
We'll make-
Except for the ones that you don't want to.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And that's one of the reasons we're here.
We'll make an additional inquiry to the lab to see if there's anything else in the form of emails that they haven't already provided to us.
I would add, I mean, there are times.
The prosecution is saying that it doesn't. The defense is saying, but it might. So Randy, the defense is saying, but it might exist. And the prosecution is saying, but it doesn't exist. And then the defense is saying, but it could exist. And then the judge is like, can you ask again if it exists? That's what's happening today. But it's hard because if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And how do you prove that something doesn't exist? So.
Okay, in the world of the law, that sometimes people forget to do things, or sometimes things fall through the cracks, and so it's always healthy to make sure that it is done thoroughly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judge.
The judge is like,
Call Steve Mercer.
Okay.
the judge is like, just please ask again. Just please ask again. So, Anna, just to answer for everybody, is this live from court? No, it is not live simulcast. This is from today's live stream. Idaho does not release it simulcast. They release it later, so we are catching up on what happened today. Alrighty. And they are calling witnesses.
Are your experts in the courtroom right now?
Yeah.
Do they need to be in the courtroom?
Yeah?
They're not asked if they be allowed to remain in the courtroom.
It's fine, they're
They
experts.
are, so they're just kind of pulling.
Right. Any objection to that? I don't know if we...
They're experts. It doesn't fucking matter.
We have to consider. I'm going to exclude your witnesses.
The judge disagrees with me.
The other witnesses are testifying by, and that'll be, I think, a cleaner, accurate response. So then,
So the judge made an exclusionary order asking, are the other witnesses in the room? There are going to be multiple witnesses regarding this DNA. Y'all are going to learn a lot about DNA. If some of it goes over your head, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
I want to have them reacting to the other testimony, we'll hear each testimony, of each witness's testimony be independent. Okay, so can you please have your other experts excluded from the court?
Where would the court like them to go? This is a media intensive environment, and I don't want them to be bothered by media while they're waiting.
The law library.
May I support in that?
Sure.
The defense said this is a media intensive environment and I don't want them something by the media. So it's where can my witnesses go, not in the courtroom, to not get swamped by media. And the court said go to the law library. Sometimes they will put them in the jury room if they need to. So Judge is saying, you know what, just go to the law library. Why is the judge in this Idaho courtroom shoved in the corner? I don't know. It's the courtroom layout. It's a strange courtroom layout, but all courtrooms are laid out differently based on how they're built. Maybe it's so the judge can see the jury equally well. There was one courtroom I worked in where the judge was mostly in the corner, and the judge liked being able to see like counsel table and the jury. They had like a really good view of the courtroom instead of having to turn their head to it.
Sorry, Mr. Mercer.
Oh, the sound in this courtroom is horrible. Horrible. Like horrible. And then it looks like there's people also on Zoom. There was an allowance by the court for the victim families to attend court via Zoom. Until this witness gets to the witness stand, I'm turning down the white noise. But there was a motion to allow victims' families and interested parties to attend by Zoom if they didn't want to be in the same courtroom as Mr. Kohberger. So there are Zoom.
Swear that the testimony you give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
Expert getting sworn in by the clerk.
Go ahead, it's water there.
This Deputy Water. Thank you, Deputy Water.
State your name and spell your last.
Yes, my name is Stephen with PH Mercer, M-E-R-C-E-R.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Stephen Mercer
Taylor?
for the defense
Good morning,
regarding
State
DNA.
are you from?
Rockville, Maryland.
What do you do for work?
I am a licensed attorney in Maryland in the District of Columbia in the field of criminal defense.
I am very surprised that the court is allowing a criminal defense attorney who just knows a lot about DNA to testify as an expert. But here we are. So, is this Judge? I saw a couple of you ask. Yes, this is Judge. This is well, this is not Judge. This is the witness, but this is Judge's courtroom. And yes, for those of you new to this case or new to this channel, the judge's last name is Judge. It is Judge John Judge. So Judge. Are the mics even on? I believe that the camera is operating off of an on-camera mic, not mics that are lined in. When they cover trial, Court TV will line the mics in the courtroom. Here, it seems like they're using on-camera mics. I need to ask Andrea Burkhart because she's been in the courtroom for a number of these appearances. It sounds like they're using on-camera microphones. And then gain them up to pick up the noise, but then you pick up all the white noise.
The area of specialization in DNA and forensic litigation.
How long have you been an attorney?
I was licensed in the state of Maryland in 1995 and in the District of Columbia.
Oh, finally, someone who makes me feel young.
I'm also a member of several federal bars, including the Supreme Court, where I appeared as co-counsel in Maryland v. King, a DNA database case from 2013.
This is why he's an expert.
As well as the Fourth Circuit, the D.C. Circuit, and a number of federal district courts.
Okay.
And have you tell me about your educational background?
Oh, God.
So I have a undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree in English from Syracuse University, 1984. Juris Doctor J.D. from the District of Columbia School of Law from 1994.
And you mentioned you have a specialty in DNA. Where does that come from?
So my experience with DNA began with the first constitutional challenge to Maryland's DNA database statute.
He became the guy.
2002 in the case of State v. Raines, where it raised the Fourth Amendment challenge to the compelled collection of DNA from convicted offenders. Prevailed on that case in the trial court as appealed to the Court of Appeals, which is now called the Maryland Supreme Court. The Maryland Supreme Court, in a sharply divided 4-3 decision, reversed, sent it back for trial.
Okay.
The case. And that was really the beginning of my experience with forensic DNA litigation. And then from that point, I continued in that field, attended training with the District of Columbia Public Defender Service.
I will just say this happens a lot in law where you take a case, become an expert, and then you become like the person in the field because you are the one that then learns everything about it. Lawyers are really just highly trained students, and a lot of lawyers will become an expert in a field by accident because they had this one case. And once they've figured it all out, it's like, oh, I went down the rabbit hole, I figured it all out. Then all the other lawyers are like, you figured it out. Can you explain it to us? And then you're like the guy, and that's your whole career. So this happens. This happens to lawyers all the time. This has happened to me. I've become the girl. It's like, you know the thing. It's like, I did it once. Now I'm the tax girl, but it happens. Does Emily seem louder? Yeah, it's a whole different mic, different setup because I'm traveling. Yep, a whole different vibe.
Wet chemistry work, had numerous opportunities to tour law enforcement labs, including the NIST lab, as well as Montgomery County's lab, Bodie Technology, the FBI lab, as well. And so I continued working in the field, providing both direct representation in DNA cases as well as consultation through my private practice. And then in 2010, the public defender recruited me to head up the forensics division at Maryland's Office of the Public Defender, which is a
and then he became like the guy.
And then there, I really dived much deeper into the field of DNA forensic litigation, at that time. And if there's some questions, I can explain that further.
I may ask you some others about that in just a moment. Will you tell me about any publication in articles that you
Yes, so I published an article, co-authored an article in Maryland's DNA Databank back in the early 2000s following the State v. Raines decision.
Stay.
I
Wait,
also
no.
published an article it was the NY News Law Review about shadow DNA databanks with a co-author, Jessica Grable. And those are the principal articles with respect to forensic DNA.
So he's an expert.
You mentioned a couple of professional organizations that you belong to. Are there others?
Yes, so I'm a member of the jurisprudential section of the American Academy of Forensic Scientists.
I don't know if
and
the prosecution's going to
there,
object
for example, in 2018,
to him being an expert.
On proposed regulation of the field of forensic genealogy. And then I'm also a member of the National Criminal Defense Attorneys Association and a number of local bar associations in Maryland, as well as the State Bar Association.
You mentioned forensic genetic genealogy. Can you tell me your background related to that?
So following really the advent of forensic genealogy in 2018, that is when I had the opportunity to litigate cases, criminal cases involving that technique, the testing and the investigation related to the testing. And
So he's been learning in this field as this field has evolved.
And the
It's nice to have somebody with that background.
that were obtained through the searching of genetic databanks.
You are here on Bryan Kohberger's case. How did you become involved in this?
Yeah, so the question was, what would a reasonable defense attorney do when confronted with DNA evidence that needs to be litigated?
I
What are
don't-
the minimum practice
why is that
standards?
the
So I'm
question?
not here to discuss Idaho's discovery rules or offer legal opinions about constitutional standards. Rather, my area of focus is based on my experience, training, and expertise in forensic DNA litigation, and what a minimum practice standard would be
Media
for a
in the
reasonable
courtroom.
trial attorney who must comply.
The typing is always media in the courtroom sitting next to the camera operator. It happens every single hearing. It makes me bananas. I get it. He is saying that he is here to testify about what the defense needs to do their job. So, Your Honor, the defense needs this information to do their job. This is relevant. This is not just like, oh, well, we don't always turn it over. We need to turn it over because this is what they need.
With their duty to investigate the case on behalf of their client.
And is that because...
Not the court reporter. The court reporter's further away.
Genetic genealogy.
And that
Well, yes,
stenography
forensic,
sounds different.
Evidence is often central in a case, and DNA evidence in particular. And so when there's an item, for example,
It's not
here,
me.
an environmental sample of trace DNA evidence that, as I understand it from reviewing the pleadings, was twice tested, first for an STR profile, and then later for a genomic profile.
Not a trial
the question
witness.
becomes, what is the minimum practice standard for an attorney to be effective in their representation?
This is
of
just
the
for
client,
discovery
given,
hearings.
That type of evidence.
When you're talking about two samples happening, or two tests happening, why should an attorney know about that?
Well, there are a number of reasons why it's crucial for the attorney to investigate any testing of evidence that is central to a case. And again, here it's an environmental sample of trace DNA that is being tested. And so it's essential for the attorney to know, for a number of reasons, about the details of the testing and the investigation when we're talking specifically about forensic genealogy. Number one is there's pretrial concerns. And those pretrial concerns that can be raised would involve suppression issues.
That's what we're dealing with right now.
These are questions that are very much evolving in the state of our litigation. But to understand the viability of a Fourth Amendment challenge, there has to be a factual investigation. There has to be a determination of the conduct that law enforcement undertook during the forensic analysis of the genealogy. So, for example, was it fast and loose?
He's arguing that for the defense to do their job, they need to be able to challenge the DNA. And they need to be able to challenge the DNA based on the evidence turned over. but they can't challenge it unless the evidence is turned over. So he's essentially arguing that the defense is in a catch-22 if the prosecution doesn't turn over what they're asking for regarding these initial steps of the DNA. And it is an area of law that is progressing. I mean, it's an area of law that is constantly evolving. That's the word I wanted, because it is an evolution. As technology evolves, the law has to evolve with it, and what the prosecution needs to turn over evolves with that. So that's the heart of this argument.
Was their searching of data banks that violated the terms and conditions of those data banks? Was there surreptitious DNA collection?
I hate this chair.
From individuals, targeted individuals in family trees. So these are very fact-specific inquiries that the attorney must know in formulating a suppression challenge under the Fourth Amendment, because it's all about reasonable expectations of privacy. And what's really critical here to understand, and this is close to me from my litigation, early on,
I do that sometimes.
The government and law enforcement's argument was
I'll try to curse more.
There are minimal privacy interests at stake because forensic DNA profile is like a fingerprint, and it says nothing about who the person is. But now with forensic genealogy, we're talking about genomic profiles, potentially whole genomic profiles, or at the very least a SNP profile, single nucleotide polymorphism profile. Single nucleotide polymorphism. And
SMP, not SNP, not SMP. And every time he says SNP, I think of SMP, and it gets very, very confusing. So they are talking about the SMP profiles. The profiles they are talking about for DNA are different than what they use at trial. So this is the kind of precursor. This is not the evidence that's going to be used at trial. This is the evidence that is used to get to the evidence that's going to be used at trial. And so they're fighting over the initial stages. And that's where we're at.
SNP profile that contains
not SMP.
Information that is very, very private. And so this is a real game changer in the privacy interests that are at stake, and that the attorney needs to understand in investigating the case to assess and to evaluate that suppression issue, that Fourth Amendment issue. So that's one issue pre-trial. There's also concerns about reliability. And by reliability, I'm not talking necessarily about the forensic genomic profile, but I'm talking about the STR profile. And again, because as I understand it from the pleadings, there were multiple tests on the same environmental sample of trace DNA. One produced a STR profile that I understand from the pleadings is represented as being a single source male profile. The reliability of that needs to be investigated, and certainly through one aspect of that is investigating
how did they get to the profile, right?
That is provided for the STR testing. But we also have to appreciate, and again, I'm not a DNA scientist or a biologist, but I'm an attorney that works with experts, and I need to know what type of expert to hire. And one thing that I do realize in looking at this is when there's multiple tests of the same piece of evidence, and you have a genomic profile, in other words, potentially the entire human genome that is typed from this environmental sample of trace DNA, or at least an SNP profile, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 700,000 locations of data. What does that tell us about the STR profile markers? So for example, the STR profile markers, which are typed, are 20 out of 30,000 STR markers overall. And so what I would be investigating with a qualified expert is, number one, I don't know from the pleadings if there's a whole genome profile that's been developed for forensic genealogy, but if there is, that should contain STR markers. What does that tell us about the reliability?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. This attorney works in the area where Natalie Lawyer Chick works. It seems like he is one of the head public defenders probably in the country that deals with DNA. So I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if this is who trained Natalie Lawyer Chick at all. Wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure she absolutely knows him. So not surprised. This is, again, him telling the court, Your Honor, this is a big deal and this is why. So if all you are hearing at this point is like, blah, 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 not the dream SMP, he is trying to explain to the court why this matters and why the defense can't do their job without the court forcing the prosecution to turn this stuff over. So it is helping he is helping the defense lay their argument groundwork that this is absolutely necessary.
Of the SDR testing, is there any potential for artifacts? Is there any potential for an undetected low-level mixture?
But he knows this so well that
Those types of questions
he's
that
up here with this, and the rest of us are like,
available to inquire and ask about, where you have multiple tests of the same piece of evidence, and it's an environmental sample of trace DNA. Now, if it's just an SMP profile, I say just, but that's 700,000 locations of information that is like a probabilistic future diary of someone's health, medical, and all manner of conditions that are linked to genetics.
Nathan, no. Kohberger has pled not guilty. This case is slated for trial in October. They are on a very, very, very quick clock here, which is why they're fighting over discovery.
That may not have the STR markers in it itself, but it will have information, SMP markers in the neighborhood of, so to speak, of STR markers that will also shed light.
He can't do layman's terms for the court. This is a discovery hearing.
So these are, particularly in the capital case, crucial areas of inquiry that must be
For y'all, the layman's
by
terms are,
defense
we
teams
need
in
it,
conjunction
give it
with
to
experts
us.
that they retain. But they can't even decide what experts to retain without having the discovery. And that's the minimum practice standard. And that's a point that I've made in testimony before the court, where it's been accepted as an
Okay.
expert in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia, that the minimum practice standard is that the attorney must obtain discovery of the scientific testing of an evidence sample. And that, particularly so in a capital case, particularly where
Minimum practice standards. Your Honor, this is going to come back on appeal if you don't order this to be turned over, because we're not doing our job if this is not turned over. That's what the defense is putting on the record here.
we're talking about an environmental sample of trace DNA. It's absolutely crucial to get that discovery, because then that informs the scope of the investigation, the experts to hire, and what happens. Now, also, with respect to the forensic genealogy, it's important not to separate this out into all these different components. It is, you have the SMP testing, and you also have the development of these family trees and database searching.
Hannah Young,
This is all
yes.
part of
This
the same
court, this
testing
judge.
and experiment. They go really hand in hand.
Hopefully better audio.
Unravel them. They really have to be considered together as a single core of different strands of the testing and experiment, because the attorney needs to know how these family trees have been developed, because we're talking now about trial issues, and the government is introducing the STR profile. They have to introduce statistics that explain the significance of any STR match that the government is identifying as central to its case. And so the defense must investigate ways to cross-examine those statistics and the rarity of that match that the government is attaching great significance to. And so an area to look into and to inquire about are the limits of the statistical tool that the government is using, or the state is using, which is based on the premise that sort of what's called the random person not excluded. And that's answering the question of the rarity of a profile in a population of unrelated people. But
It's in the courtroom, Kate.
unrelated. So we know there's no universe
So,
where a
that's in court.
has no relatives. And in fact, in a case involving forensic genealogy, the way that the defendant is identified is by searching a pool of related people. And so we need to be able to investigate and evaluate the rarity of a profile within a related population. And that's a different question than what the government answers with its,
That's a different question than what you're asking right now.
That is typically used. And so, again, without the discovery of the forensic genealogy, both the testing as well as the experiments that were done with the test results, i.e. the database searches, as well as the family tree build-out, the attorney can't investigate that. And in that situation, by not investigating it, is not complying with their duty to investigate that is required, especially in a capital case.
I heard you say that when you have a sample, in this case being a sample came from an item.
Oh my God, it's so hard to answer these questions.
And then when you go, when you have genetic genealogy testing, you end up with whole genome typing for an SNP profile? Did I understand that?
Yes, and it's unclear to me at this point what type of genomic profile was developed, whether it was a whole genome sequence or whether it was an SNP profile, which contains about.
That's the
7,000
typing.
mutations of very
There it is.
personal
There's the typing.
information.
That attorney right there in the white shirt. That's the typing you're hearing.
You need to look at those to test the reliability of the STR profile. Did I hear that right?
Yes, so this is, as an attorney and not a scientist, but as an attorney who has a duty to investigate, this now is an area where the attorney will look to retain a qualified expert who can evaluate and assess the linkages between the SNP profile, whole genomic profile, and then STR profile. To be sure, an SNP profile or forensic genomic profile can't be searched in codex. It's not that type of situation. They can't be directly compared. But there are techniques that can evaluate if it is a whole genomic profile. You would look to a scientist who then would be targeting
I'm
the
not
areas of the
typing.
whole genomic profile that comprise the STR profile, to then evaluate the reliability of the STR profile, the potential for any mixture, the potential for any artifacts in the STR profile. Or if it's an SNP profile which doesn't have the STR locations in it, then you would look for an expert who understands that the neighboring regions around where the STR markers can be evaluated and assessed to provide information about what the STR markers could be.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
So what you're saying is that you need to look at the qualified.
The judge is now asking.
Look at the SNP profile to compare it to the SPP profile for the reliability of the STP profile.
The STR profile.
STR.
Yes, so.
Yeah,
so
not the band, Your Honor. Not
absolutely
STP.
That,
The judge is asking, so you need the initial profiles to deal with the veracity of the second profile. I disagree with that because the veracity of, we have Kohberger's DNA, we have DNA on the knife sheath, are those a match, is different than the, we have a DNA profile and a knife sheath, whose might it be? Those are two different evaluations, but that's what the court is asking. What do we need this for? And the gain on this, you guys, I see all the complaints, that nothing I can do. I don't know why in the world there aren't any other mics, but it really does sound like one on-camera mic, not a boom mic in the courtroom, one on-camera mic in the courtroom, and that's it. They are not, the mics on the stand are not being fed into the audio that we're getting out. It's just kind of a mess.
could be discerned from an analysis of the SMP or whole genomic profile. Because again, we're talking about two different tests of the same piece of evidence.
Well,
And
not
there
really.
have been,
When he says two different tests on the same piece of evidence, they're not like continually swabbing. Once they have a DNA profile on a computer database, they can just keep checking that profile against stuff. They're not having to like re-swab the DNA the way you would see, or we saw in like the Murdaugh trial, where it's like they're getting to smaller and smaller bits of evidence. Once they have the DNA and it's profiled, then you can run it in the computer systems against everything else. So.
in peer-reviewed publication, I mean, one that comes to mind is Jae-Wah Kim, who published in the journal Cell about how your an SMP profile can be linked to.
I think that goes beyond what the court asked, but okay.
And that's by zeroing in on sort of the neighboring regions and examining those. So again, I'm not a biologist or a scientist, but I'm an attorney.
And the
who has a duty to
prosecution
investigate
argued to kept this
and
attorney out because they're like,
investigate
but why
by
though?
experts to examine this data, this discovery that hasn't been produced yet. And so that's why the minimum practice standard is to get that.
Because this is more interesting than DNA at the moment. I'm sorry for those of you fascinated by DNA. I know this is in the thick of these arguments, but for anyone who's like, being a lawyer would be fascinating, these are the thick kind of arguments that sometimes it's like, okay, but also, why is Kohberger in a suit? Probably because his attorneys asked, and his attorneys are allowed to ask for that because it's televised. So the courts are allowed, the defense is allowed to make that request, and the courts are allowed to grant that at any court hearings. And so televised court hearings will often see defendants in street clothes, not in jail clothes, normally until sentencing.
So that the attorney can then assess that discovery and then retain a qualified scientist to help understand the extent to which the SMP testing will shed light on the reliability of the STR testing that has already been done at the same study.
Okay, so that having that profile on the SMP can verify the legitimacy of the ST.
Right, so that's my hypothesis. That's what I go to the expert.
That's my
This
hypothesis.
is very much an emerging area of forensic science and
Counsel, come on now. The court's like, so you need this one to verify that one. He has sidestepped that question and was like, well, it's something I'd want to ask the expert. Here's my understanding, not being a DNA expert, but this defense attorney is sidestepping the court's question. My answer to the court's question is no. The one-to-one of you have Kohberger's DNA, you have the DNA on the knife sheath, do they match, is a different question than unknown DNA on a knife sheath, running it through IgG profiles. Those are two different analyses. One does not verify the other. Those are independent analyses that are independently verified within their own thing. So it's not like this one validates that one. So the court's like, but does A equal B? And he's like, well, I would want to know that information from an expert. So he's like, whoop. He is not actually answering the court's question. And the court has now asked it 3 times. But I might have blanked in the middle there, so it might be more. So no, that's not it. Here's the thing. Whatever they did with the initial DNA, it led them to Kohberger's dad, right? And they got the trash. They were trying to get Kohberger in the trash at the parents' house. They got the dad. Once they got the dad, it was just like, okay, well, now we're in the familial DNA realm. And then they arrested Kohberger, got Kohberger's DNA, and then the 2 DNAs matched. So it's like, but at the end of the day, the DNAs match. So how you got there is what they're fighting over. How did we get to arresting Kohberger and getting his DNA? Getting the initial DNA was not the whole of his arrest warrant. There was a lot in the arrest warrant. So we'll see.
Yes, you're
I'm
welcome.
going to step in. I don't believe this witness is qualified to opine on what's needed in these scientific processes. He just indicated that it was his personal hypothesis. I would renew my objection on it.
Yes, he said it's a personal hypothesis.
I apologize. Go ahead, ask your next question.
So the prosecution objected.
When I'm talking about either a whole genome or
Oh, boy.
profile, am I looking for just like a sheet of paper that has a bunch of numbers on it, or is there a packet of information that I need to go to my expert?
No, you need the raw data of the profile along with, it's similar to the sort of data that you were paying for the SDR testing. You get the raw data of the profile, you get the laboratory protocols, you get all the bench notes, how the profile was generated, but also you should get the discovery about how the profile was then searched in different databases and family trees constructed.
That was going to be my next question. I heard you say that we can't look at this whole genome sequencing or the SMP in one category and then look at the building the tree to identify from a genetic.
This is a great question from Bentz. Was something not done right by law enforcement? I'm confused about the argument. They're arguing over getting the discovery so that they can determine if they need to fight about what law enforcement did. So they're at the initial stages. It's like the defense is arguing we can't even know what happened yet until we have all of the rest of the information. And the prosecution is like, there's no more information to give you. So, that.
The genealogy piece, the genealogist piece, in its own separate areas, but they're not 2 separate lanes that they like.
Yes, they go hand in hand. You do one or the other. I mean, they go together.
Why?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me why? Can you explain why you say they go together? Why didn't you tell me?
Well,
And
the profile is what is searched in the.
I didn't see that. I didn't even notice that attorney Ann Taylor is also wearing a mask, which is aggravating not being able to hear her. I'm not aggravated. It's making the situation worse with not being able to hear her. So I didn't notice until now that she was actually wearing a mask because I was looking at the other expert, and that's part of why this is so hard to hear.
To then identify, potential relatives, and then family trees are built out. That's the object of the S&P testing. What's important
Oh my God,
to know
yes,
from a
please.
defense perspective, in terms of trial work, and
Just don't give me 4 margaritas.
I'm
Just
not
stick to
trying
2.
introduce a statistic that is premised on the assumption of an unrelated universe of people. So what's the chance of finding a profile in a population where there's no relatedness between that profile and anyone in that universe? And so, as you know from talking about this whole concept of friendship genealogy, people who are related have similar DNA.
And the speculation.
I was trying to pause it and I totally fucked it up. Hold on. This is where we were. My bad. All right. I was trying to pause it because I thought this was a really good question from Randy. Randy said, I don't understand why they don't just go straight to the source and get Bryan Kohberger's DNA. They did that. But after all of this, they did all of this first. This is part of how they narrowed in on Kohberger as a suspect, because they had DNA and they had the crime scene and they didn't have a suspect. So between the DNA and the car, they narrowed in on Kohberger as a suspect. After Kohberger was arrested, they took his DNA and they matched the DNA to the knife sheath. This is everything that happened before Kohberger was arrested, and that's what they're arguing over. So for trial, we're just going to hear about the DNA taken from Kohberger and the knife sheath. None of this is going to come in at trial. This is for discovery.
About the chance of finding a profile within a related pool or related universe.
Oh, Judy, it's not too early.
And that's a legitimate area of inquiry on cross-examination for the defense to demonstrate the limitations of the statistical question that the state is presenting through its expert witness. And to do that, we need to know, for example, who the population of related people are, because often from my work on the forensic genealogy, what I've seen is that when the match is found, when the STR match is found, then all building out, all further testing stops on the forensic genealogy side. And so it's important to know who hasn't been tested on the related person side in terms of developing cross-examination.
That's what I'm here for.
Of the statistical tool that the state uses in its case to demonstrate the verity of the...
Are you done yet? Oh my God, please. Sir, you're very wise. It's just, I feel like we know.
Yes, so, which wasn't surprising to me, because even though typically the government doesn't seek to introduce the forensic genealogy, in its case, it nevertheless is evidence that is a scientific test of material in the case.
It's an investigation tool,
so
though.
The discovery rules typically call, for example, in Maryland, in the District of Columbia, call for...
It doesn't matter.
...of scientific testing of evidence.
All scientific testing needs to be turned over. The prosecution said we turned over everything that we have. The defense is saying there should be more records than that. Why didn't you give us those? That's what they're fighting over.
In a case, and that's regardless of whether the government is going to introduce it or not. DC is a little different, where it requires either a materiality showing or that the item is introduced into evidence. And so even when there's a limitation on the item being introduced into evidence, that really goes to the item tested, which here is the environmental sample of trace DNA. And of course, the government has twice tested it. And so
Happy birthday, Nicole.
the attorney to be able to fulfill their duty to investigate and satisfy the minimum practice standards, they should have access
The audio
to
sucks.
testing of that item of evidence, which is central to the case.
Just 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, the court audio is horrific.
Mr. Mercer, I don't have any other questions, so I'm making anything on Mr. Minute's custody.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the end of... Damn it, that's loud. This is the end of part 1 on Court TV, so we're going to switch feeds, see if we get a little bit better audio. Hopefully, where we pick up with the next feed will come in with a different witness. So let me switch feeds real quick. I'm on... The mobile setup isn't easy. I know that the sound out of court sucks. There is not much I can do about it. It's the way they've got it gained up so we can hear it, because I really do think they're working with just a one camera setup. So let me get this queued up real quick from this witness and go from there. Let's see if this is the end of this witness. That's the end of that witness. All right, so we're going to see if the East Idaho news is a bit better. Part 1, part 2, part 4. That's not helpful. We need part 3. Where is part 3? All right, part 3 should get us to the next witness, and that's what we're going to do now. All right. They took a little bit of a break after that witness. We are now queuing up for part 2 of this hearing with the next witness. I'm going to speed this up at 1.25 so we get through this before I have to go.
Thanks very much. Please be seated.
All right. And I will try to keep answering questions as I go through, or maybe talking over. The white noise on this is a bit better, thank goodness. But it doesn't have,
Previously,
there we go.
still in the courtroom, and
There we go.
Dr. Larkin is going to the city to the witness box.
Oh, there's a lot more hours. We might not get to every DNA witness, because there is so many.
About her foundation being expert. And then we were given the opportunity to look at the PowerPoint, and so
Your Honor.
There's a
we decided to do
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint, and it was immediately apparent to us that we would need to consult with one of our own experts. There's a lot of scientific terms, charts, graphs, etc. We simply are not prepared with this late notice to respond right now. So what we would ask the court to do, so we don't hold things up today, would be to just give us the same opportunity to reserve cross for a later time, like the other witness who was just disclosed yesterday.
okay, ready? Okay, so we need to come back.
Here's what just happened. The prosecution said, we are not prepared to cross-examine this witness today because this witness was just disclosed. So we are going to need to come back and do cross-examination another day. So this is part 1 of many, because they are going to have to come back and do cross-examination on these witnesses another day. Oh my God, I hate this so much. I hate this so much. I hate this so much. Why? So we're going to get through as much as we can. And then what I'm going to do is probably do a summary video of these before we do cross-examination. Oh my God. None of this is getting resolved. This is why I do this live. This is why I do this live. This is not okay. I'm not all right. I hate it so much. Hold on. Let me see if I can. Now this audio needs to be boosted, which I cannot do on my mobile setup. All right, let's just roll and see what we get. Oh my God.
All right. Dr. Larkin, I think we are prepared to start with the PowerPoint now.
Government lawyers are not paid well. Government lawyers are not well paid.
Are you ready? Yes.
These lawyers are government employees. They are not super well paid. All right, Dr. Larkin. Yay. Is this pretrial going to take forever? Yes. Question, what are they looking for? More reports regarding the seriology, the familial DNA.
There we go. Okay.
This is so they can attack some of the search warrants and stuff.
We are.
Our government lawyers paid an experience, partly. This was recorded on a potato, that's a fact.
All right. Dr. Larkin, we are going to be talking about genetic genealogy first.
The prosecution says they have. That's the fight.
That, and ask you a question.
Just go for the highlights. I might have to do that.
I think you need to get play.
If I hit play, then
Show presentation.
Philip, it's in my head. This is exactly what's in my head. I'm not okay. I'm not okay. No. It's just a hotel.
Yeah. We wouldn't talk about documentary law enforcement.
It's just a hotel. That's all. I'm not on the lam. I promise. Oh my God, this is
Tell
painful.
me what kind of DNA genetic genealogy is.
Okay, so DNA is just DNA, but there are a few different inheritance patterns for DNA. So there is mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome DNA, and then what we call autosomal DNA. And those are the main types that we use.
Could you just have that spelled for the court reporter?
Autosomal, A-U-T-O-S-O-M.
Please spell the sciencey things.
What is
All three.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry.
mitochondria, M-I-T-O-C-H-O-N-D-R-I-A-L, mitochondria. And then Y chromosome, it's just the letter Y, and then chromosome C-H-R-O-M-O-S-O-M-E.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let me see if I can gain
What is
this up.
Autosomal DNA is inherited from both of your parents, all 4 of your grandparents, all 8 of your great-grandparents, and so on. That's a little bit different from mitochondrial and Y chromosome. Mitochondrial you only get from your mother, so it just tracks that direct maternal line. Y chromosome DNA is only in chromosomal males, and it goes from father to son, so it tracks the direct paternal line. But autosomal DNA can show relationships on all branches of your tree because you inherit it from all of your grandparents and so on.
As a genetic genealogist, do you use one over the other when you do this?
I primarily use autosomal DNA. Mitochondrial DNA does not change very rapidly, so it doesn't give you a really good sense of how closely related you might be to someone. Y chromosome DNA is it changes a little bit more rapidly than mitochondrial DNA, but it's still fairly slow. You could have a match to someone and your connection to them could be back in the 1700s. So it's not going to tell you, who your immediate relatives are. Autosomal DNA can give you I call it kind of depth perception. It gives you a much better sense of how far back in time your connection to that other person is. And that's what's primarily.
That's a really good analogy.
It's what's primarily used in the forensic area as well.
That's a real good analogy.
That's
All right.
showing the inheritance patterns of the DNA.
Does the autosomal DNA, that provide more matches so that you can do your work easier?
Yes.
How does this happen? How do you get to do this?
So if you're just a regular old genealogist, you will purchase a DNA kit from one of the main testing companies. They will send you a little tube, and you either spit in the tube, and it seems like a lot of spit, or you do a cheek swab. You put that back in the tube, and you mail it back to the company. The company will then extract the DNA and do the analysis on it.
As a genetic genealogist, or the person who did the test, what do you get? How do you know when something happens?
Right, when your results are finished, they'll send you an email.
So they're
and you
talking
can
about,
log into the
like the
website, and
Ancestry
once you
or
do that,
23andMe
you'll
type
see,
things.
All the companies offer
Okay.
all ethnicity estimates, and so we'll tell you.
I'm gonna see if I can
whether
gain
it's
this audio.
German stock or Scottish or African.
I had to use a different,
broader ethnic background is.
I had to use a different
they'll give you a list
browser.
of matches, which are other people who've taken the same DNA test in the same database and who share DNA with you. So that's the 2 main things that you get from that.
So it's the same database. What do you mean by that?
So there are multiple companies that offer these services. So the 2 biggest ones are Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. So for example, if I tested Ancestry and my sister tested 23andMe, we won't get matched to one another because we're not in the same database.
Where you test is specific to where you're going to find who you're related to.
Right.
Okay. All right. You as a genetic genealogist, the cases refer to you.
Yes.
Okay. And so how do you get into these databases?
So at Ancestry DNA, there's a sharing system. So the person who's taken the test can essentially authorize me or invite me to view their DNA results, and then I can do that in my own account. I never have to log into their account. At the other services, with the exception of GenMatch, which we haven't gotten to yet, I would have to log into their accounts to see their DNA matches.
You mentioned that, you're backing up a little bit, but you mentioned that you can find out a lot about your ancestry.
Is that better, chat?
What other kinds of information can you find out?
Did I do it?
So, for example, at 23andMe,
Did I do it too much? Fuck.
And trait reports based on your DNA that can tell you if you have a higher than average likelihood of developing certain cancers or certain diseases. They tell you things that are kind of silly, like do you like cilantro, or if you're prone to drinking more caffeine than the average or less. But they can tell all of those things from the DNA test that they've done.
And that's only one of the databases that offer that much information.
23andMe does, and then there's a third-party site called Prometheus that you can take your data file and upload it there, and it will run into Poison. Prometheus.
I think it's so mean. They're trying with the spelling. She does explain this really well. I like this expert.
We changed slides, and now I have a slide that says microwave. What is that?
So microwave is the actual piece of lab material that we use to run this test. It was designed, so microarrays were designed for biomedical research. They're designed for scientific research. And unlike the STRs that you use for POTUS, microarrays pretty much scan your entire genome. They're looking at, so we talked about autosomal DNA. They look at about 600,000 individual bits of your autosomal DNA.
It's a lot
Those
of
are called
markers.
single nucleotide polymorphisms. So
SNP.
SNP and then
SNP.
These are individual bits of DNA that are known to vary among people. Most of our DNA is identical, so looking at those bits are not going to tell you who's related to whom. They look at these microarrays specifically to target the chunks of DNA that we know vary between or among individuals. And so that uses higher levels of DNA than you typically have for forensic purposes.
Do you mean more like when you talk about spit in the tumor's body, you have to have a lot of it to do this?
You have to have a fair amount of DNA to do a microarray.
What happens if you don't?
Then there is an alternative. There's an alternative method called whole genome sequencing, and then there's whole genome sequencing, and the specific way they go about it is called next generation sequencing. And that will actually work on lower levels of DNA. It will work on lower quality DNA, so DNA that might have been broken down because it's been exposed to the elements for a while. That will work better on DNA that's contaminated. So it might have bacterial DNA in it or fungal DNA in it. So that is an alternative approach to microarrays, but it's more labor intensive and it's more expensive.
So you need a microarray. Or
These are the ways they test the DNA.
another way that's more expensive and sounds like more issues with to get to something that you can put in the computer and find out who you're
Yes.
What is this?
So this is just kind of a teaching strategy just to show that we have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents have color-coded the grandparent lines to help us track how the matches fit in.
And when you do autosomal DNA, it's this was the people that you're drawing.
Those are people who contributed the DNA in you, yes.
What do we have here?
So this is an outline showing how some of your DNA matches are going to fit into your tree. So you may have some second cousins or first cousins once removed or second cousins once removed who also took the DNA test and are in the same database as you. And they would share DNA with you and would be listed in your matches.
And this comes up a lot where you see
In this
people
diagram,
learning all kinds of things from like 23andMe and having very awkward like Thanksgiving dinners. But that's what she's saying is if you're in a 23andMe database, you're not going to cross over and find family members in the Ancestry database.
only showing 2 great-grandparent lines. There are actually 4. If the diagram gets too messy if I try to add more. So,
I have this sinking feeling nothing's going to be resolved today.
Matches, the DNA company doesn't actually know how you're related to them. It just knows.
Like,
how
I
much
feel
DNA
like this is an exercise in
The
futility.
DNA company is not going to tell you, this is your second cousin. It's just going to say this person shares so much DNA with you, and they might could be your second cousin. They might could be something else. And then it's up to the genealogist to essentially reverse engineer the tree based on the DNA matches.
You do that when you have to find out who this person is based on these various matches in different places.
Right.
Do you have experience as a genetic genealogist doing that, where you don't know who this person is, you can't identify this person based on a kit?
Yes.
So what do you do?
Oh, they're
So
still
you'll
arguing
get
in court.
DNA
That's
matches
why.
From your testing company. And they're sorted, that list is sorted by how much DNA they share with you. So it's not necessarily sorted by how closely related those people are to you.
So this court hearing in Idaho this morning started at 10:30 local time and is still going. So that is why we don't have the attorney arguments yet. because those are still going. So we might not even be able to get to the attorney arguments today because they might not even be released today because the court releases these on a delay. These were released over the lunch break. So this, just hang in there. Just hang in there.
You get this list, and sometimes they use their real names, the people in the list. Sometimes they use an alias. Depending on the database, you may or may not be able to see their email address. And some of them will have their own family trees linked.
I'm really interested in how these databases work. I think this is helpful background on all of this.
Won't. And for the people who don't, you have to try to figure out who they are, who their parents are, who their grandparents are, and build trees for them.
They're like, who's your mama?
I can do that instantly.
You talked about shared DNA.
Oh, this is going to be a long hearing.
How closely related some of this.
Right. So
Judge is going to put up with this because of appeals. I covered that at the beginning. There are 6 motions on calendar.
To share with someone on average, the more closely you are related, but it's possible, for example, there's a range for most of these relationships. So it's actually possible that you could have a full first cousin who shares less DNA with you than a half first cousin.
So they're trying to show the judge why this
That's one of the
matters.
things that complicates
This is the point, to educate the court.
An approximate relationship from the Centimorgan note, not a hard and fast, this is definitely so-and-so relationship.
In your work, when you have your unidentified person.
The defense is doing their job in a DNA case where the DNA matters.
You're looking at these
quite a lot.
to try to get a clue. What do you do after you have this information to plug it back to?
So I have to essentially build trees for these matches. The first step in the process is to figure out how they are related to one another. Before I can figure out, for example, if I'm trying to help an adoptee find their biological parents. To figure out how they are related to their matches, first I have to figure out how the matches are related to one another. And then I kind of reverse engineer where my adoptee will fit into that family tree based on the DNA results. So we mentioned earlier one of the tools that I helped to develop for analyzing DNA results. This is a set of screenshots from this shared Centimorgan tool. It's also sometimes called the shared Centimorgan project tool. That's too many syllables. So what you do is you will type in the Centimorgan amount for one of your matches. On the previous slide, the top match was 72 Centimorgan. So if I were working that case, I would type in 72 Centimorgans into this tool. And you get the diagram there where the possible relationships are highlighted. So your person of interest is your adoptee. In this tool, I'll highlight the possible relationships for a 72 Centimorgan match. And if you count up all of the little highlighted boxes on there,
So they're saying how many points you have when you're taking something unknown and trying to find family members for it. Like, we have this sample and we're trying to match who might be related to this sample. That's what they're talking about.
Possible relationships for somebody who shares 72 Centimorgans. And so this is the, sorry, I'm not supposed to talk.
What, I don't know what the statistic that just popped up is about.
Okay, so I mentioned that this is a statistical tool that's using probabilities. And so even though there are 30 or 35 possible relationships for a 72 Centimorgan match, some of them are more likely statistically than others. And so this panel that is in that tool is listing which of the relationships are most likely. And so there are a group of relationships with, I can't quite read that from here, but I think it says half their cousins. That's the most likely group, and then below that, I think.
Danielle, for their purposes, they're explaining.
As the genealogist.
For this, they're explaining the process. So no, for this testimony, explaining the process of how to build family trees is the same. So that's what they're trying to explain.
Is that important to know how far back you have to build that tree?
You have to find the connections among the matches, and you sort of need to know where in the tree to look for that.
I think you told us you have to build trees for each of the matches.
Yes, and I have to fill out both sides of a matches tree because I don't.
I just want to see the lawyers argue.
On their mother's side or on their father's side. So I guess I actually have to build the whole.
We might have to do that Tuesday. Damn it.
Find the connections.
Any decisions that you as the genetic
I'm gonna be mad.
make to do your work finding matches?
Yes, I have to continue to build trees things.
Now, do you have to build trees for all of those 35 matches? Or do you do it until you kind of figure out who you want?
There are some matches that I may not be able to build trees for. Maybe I can't figure out who they are. So on this slide, there's only 5 matches shown, and so only 2 of the people.
It's interesting how she does it.
Their own trees. That little icon that I'm pointing the arrows at show that those 2 matches have built their own trees, and so that saves me a lot of work because I can look at their tree and rather than having to build it from scratch, I can. They've listed their parents and their grandparents, and I can just go ahead and double check, make sure that they put the right people down, rather than having to build the trees from scratch. The other people, I either have to build their trees from scratch if I can figure out who they are, or sometimes I may just have to skip them if they have a really common name and I don't know where they live or what their age is. I may, if it's a John Smith, I may never be able to figure out who they are and build out a tree for them because there are thousands of John Smiths.
I think this graphic shows us the process and how far you have to build trees for the matches and try to identify the one person. Did I understand that right?
Yes, this is just a simple example where I've built out 2 hypothetical trees for 2 hypothetical matches. In which case, in this example, I've gone out to the first great grandparents.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for connections between match. So match 1 is on the left, match 2 is on the right. I'm looking for commonalities between their 2 trees. I want to see how match 1 and match 2 are related to one another. And so in this case, I've identified, and this is hypothetical, of course, that John Smith and Mary Jones married and had children, and they were the great grandparents of the person on the left tree. And John Smith and Mary Jones were also the great grandparents of the match on the right. So now I know that match 1 and match 2 are second cousins to one another. That's kind of the first hook that I have into trying to figure out how my person of interest gets into that tree.
Huh.
And so I would then diagram.
What do you do for that?
Yes.
She's like, I have a diagram.
I would then start building what I call a descendant diagram, and I will do this in a sketching software. So I have John Smith and Mary Jones, and I've listed their 2 children and their grandchildren, and then I put the DNA matches in there so I can see how the matches are related to one another.
Let me see if I understand this. If matches here are unknown first, and then build their trees out and found great grandparents or the same great grandparents in both these other matches behind. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you took that match and started figuring out who their kids were, and then you their kids had kids, is that what we're seeing here?
Right, and so what I'm looking for now, so I found these 2, match 1 and match 2, who are second cousins to one another. What I'm looking for now,
I mean, kind of.
Create more DNA matches, okay, into that tree that I've just got my hook on.
Why do you want to do that?
Because the more DNA matches I have, the stronger my statistical analysis for where my person of interest gets into that tree.
How do you do that?
So if I'm working in adoptee case, my goal is to get my adoptee into as many databases as possible. I always call them tested ancestry because that's the biggest database. Then 23andMe because it's the second biggest. And then my heritage is the next in size. And so I want to get them into all of these databases because I can do this. I can build this tree using some matches from Ancestry and some matches from 23 and some from my heritage.
So she's talking about how she can match across the different databases.
So that I
Okay.
have as much statistical data as possible when I try to place my person of interest into that tree.
And that's when you have somebody who
So, Patty, this hearing's not done yet in Idaho. So we're not going to finish today because it's released on delay and the hearing is still ongoing. So the attorneys are still arguing in court in Idaho right now. These are the witnesses from the morning that have finally been released onto YouTube. So we are not going to finish this hearing together today because it's not going to be released together today before I have to go. So this expert is really going through the example of how you take a DNA sample and build out the family tree. And that's what law enforcement did. They took an unknown DNA sample off of the knife sheath and tried to build out a family tree. This is just in front of Judge. Tomorrow, no, not tomorrow. I will not be able to do it tomorrow. So it's just a busy week.
doing their own DNA testing.
So
and
Tuesday.
sharing their profile with you, so you can build the tree out,
Yes.
try to identify who their biological is. I think I got it. What are, sorry?
So this is all a discovery hearing.
The people matches the numbers. What's
Yes.
going on here?
Those may be hard to see, but in this case, I'm showing an example listing the centimorgan amounts to the various DNA matches that I've managed to place into this tree.
In this one, you have a whole red line we didn't have before. How did you figure out?
Well, they
So
matched
this
it
is a
once.
hypothesis, it's an educated guess.
Ah,
About where my person of interest might fit into that tree based on how much DNA they share with those 5.
they matched the DNA once they had Kohberger's DNA. It's how they found Kohberger that's what they're fighting over here. Everything before his arrest. Kohberger wasn't in CODIS. So they started running DNA elsewhere because they had DNA and nothing else. Pam said there will be 15 new filings by Tuesday. Yeah, there's a number I haven't gotten to yet. So, yes. Was EDB cut off by this being a thing too? By what being a thing? The question caught my eye, but I don't know what thing we're referring to.
And it might be right, it might be wrong. It's just
Then they might not have found him.
a way to guide my next step in the research.
They might have gotten to him by the car alone.
Research, at this point, might need to.
Well, car and
put
cell
out a
phone.
database
Well, they couldn't have gotten a
of
cell phone.
matches.
Car.
I run the what are the odds analysis tool to see what other hypotheses might fit.
You want to tell me about the what are the odds tool now?
Sure, I can. That's a different slide. So this is the what are the odds tool. You basically build the descendant diagram that was on the previous
I don't know about
slide,
that.
but into this tool. You enter the centimorgan amounts, so that's the measure of shared DNA. You enter the centimorgan amounts into the WATO tool. So we call it WATO for short, WATO. So you enter the centimorgan amounts where those individual DNA matches fit into the tree, and then you can ask the tool to suggest possible hypotheses for you. And that's what those teal boxes are. Those teal
Can we
boxes
see?
that the tool is saying
Can we see the graph?
could fit into this tree. in this
Show us the
based on the
chart.
DNA matches.
This tool
Show
tells
us
you
the chart.
Yes.
schematic line. What do you do from there?
So from here, there are several hypotheses there. You could go back to the previous slide.
Yes, they have been, and there's some rules about how they
There's
do
several
it.
hypotheses there. So what I want to do, and each one of them is going to have a score. And so what I want to do is focus on the hypotheses that have the highest scores, because those are the ones that are most likely. And I might investigate whether, if I'm looking for a birth father, was he in the right place at the time of conception, or was he serving overseas? If he was serving overseas, then I rule him out. I might reach out to members of his family and ask them to do a DNA test for me, because then I can add their DNA match to this analysis and sort of slowly over time focus in on my most likely candidate, for example, if it's a birth father.
Sandy, the closed caption's turned on the screen.
You've got the regular people that haven't chosen to do this, and see if they voluntarily want to put their DNA in to help them.
Yes, there's more than just the DNA in this case.
I think we're ready for this slide. You know, I'm kind of showing you that.
Okay, so this is just a,
I know. I want her to show us.
but I'm showing a different scenario in which the DNA matches were lower. They shared less DNA. This is just another hypothetical example to show how the probabilities and the suggested hypotheses will change depending on how much DNA those matches shared with DNA matches.
But if you work more complicated.
It does. The lower the DNA matches, the harder it is to actually find what you're looking
I didn't travel with the pickle.
If the people testing, and you've been talking about here, that would mean
They're trying to make sure it was done right.
Yes,
But
sometimes
yeah.
genealogists call it target testing, some call it strategic testing. You're essentially reaching out to people who haven't tested yet and asking them, hey, I want to do a genealogy test for me. And you're doing that to help narrow down the connections.
But yes, if you're Kohberger's defense team and there's a Fourth Amendment violation here, you want that DNA thrown out. So that's what they're doing. Debbie Blair asked, do I think it was done right? I don't know. We don't have the full information. So I don't know.
We're pointing at the hypotheses in this tree that have the highest.
They're
scores.
they're fighting over it. I don't know what they did.
Relatives who might be willing to do it.
I only know what's in the motions.
those scores come from the tool.
Those come from the tool and there's.
And those give you, I guess, information about which direction's more likely.
Yeah, the probabilities are based on the shared centimorgan amounts.
This is a discovery hearing, so I don't think anything in here is going to hurt.
We're going to shift and talk about.
It's a
genetic.
they're trying to get to more information.
What do you mean by that?
So forensic is basically pertinent to any sort of legal proceeding or court case. Not a lawyer. Don't talk about that wrong. But in this case, sometimes so the Department of Justice calls this work forensic genetic genealogy. A lot of practitioners call it investigative genetic genealogy, but it's the same thing.
Does that mean there's work that's done for law enforcement?
It's work that's done for law enforcement, and it's also done, oftentimes, I think the client might actually be a medical examiner if they're dealing with an unknown human remains.
Do you do that kind of work?
I do not.
Are you in contact with them?
I have learned a bit about it, yes.
And how have you learned it?
I've learned about it by communicating with practitioners who do it, and also by attending conferences.
It's so hard to hear hand Taylor during this
You know that you wanted to?
hearing.
Yes.
There's no other qualifications you need, but it's what you have right
No, not at the moment.
now. The slide talks about the price and quality of DNA.
And
What kind of DNA is needed for forensic DNA? What kind of DNA?
So you can use any type of DNA, the same as you would use for regular genealogy. You could do mitochondrial, you could do like chromosome, you could do autosomal, and as I mentioned before, most of this work is using autosomal DNA. And the difference is that if somebody's spitting in a tube, they're providing a lot of DNA, and they're providing clean DNA, and they're providing DNA that gets preserved with the fluid to keep it from breaking down. And that's not always the situation that you're going to find at either crime scenes or if you're dealing with unknown human remains.
I know we talked about the microarray profile, and there was another way to get this profile to do your work. Is that where we're going?
That's where we're going.
Tell me about that.
Okay,
Exactly.
so next generation genome sequencing is a technique that you can use to analyze the entire human genome. You're not just focusing on the 600 or 700,000 bits that the genealogy company uses. You're trying to sequence the whole thing. And that can sometimes work when there's not enough DNA for a microarray.
How is that done?
It's hard
can
to
you explain the science
So I'm
of
using
mapping the
this
human
graphic.
genome?
So imagine that the solid red line at the top is the entire genome that we're trying to analyze. Next genome
Can you
sequencing actually focuses
map
on
it all?
little subsets, and it's kind of like skimming a document. So if you skim a document, you're not reading every single word. Next generation sequencing is not trying to read every single little bit of DNA along the way. Instead, it's skimming little bits, and it's missing a lot on the first skim. And then it skims it again, and it will miss some on the second skim, but it might pick up bits.
Sorry.
of the first.
Sorry if that was loud.
And so it keeps skimming the DNA.
Water.
And after the analysis is done, you can kind of reconstruct from the little snippets that you skimmed along the way. You can post the next gap.
And then
So
reconstruct
these are
it.
the portions in gray that were skimmed in the multiple episodes, and those are called reads in the next generation sequencing process. The more reads you do, the more of the genome you can reconstruct, and the more confident you can be that you did it correctly. Because sometimes if you're skimming a word, you might, the word might be there and you read there because you were reading too fast, right? So the more times you skim an individual piece of DNA, the more confident you can be that it was all accurate.
Is there a number of times that's practiced skim?
So for medical research, for biomedical research, the companies who sell this equipment
I don't.
recommend that you do 30 times. They call it a 30 times coverage
It's
to get a confident
ma'am,
read.
this is not
Oftentimes,
biomedical
they're
research.
not able to get 30x.
Okay, they might not have enough DNA here. They had touched DNA off a knife sheath. It's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, that might be ideal, but I like her as a witness. If she testifies at trial, I think she's easy to follow. But this is just, we're not even going to get to arguments.
If you can't do 30x coverage of the genome, which is often the case when you're working with low quantities of DNA or contaminated DNA, you won't get the whole genome. You'll be missing pieces. This is a stage of the process called bioinformatics. And you actually have a specialist who goes in and uses statistical methods to try to fill in.
Okay, but what happened in this case?
In the initial analysis.
Can you just tell us what happened here? Not like what they do in biomedical research? What the fuck just happened?
That's showing us the parts that were imputed. That's the term that we would use.
That wasn't me. That was East Idaho News.
All right, once you have this information, after bioinformatics has added their details, then what happens?
So recall that the next generation sequencing is analyzing the entire genome. But the genealogy companies, the matching databases, are not interested in the entire genome. They're not going to analyze the whole genome. They only want the SNPs, so the SNPs, that were analyzed by the microarray. So now that bioinformatician has to go in, essentially delete a whole bunch of the whole genome data so that they're only left with the portions that would have been on a microarray had they done microarray and posters.
But what happened here?
Exactly, they're filled in to make it whole, they're stripped back to make it usable.
Yes.
Like genetic genealogy data. How do you know if you're not just left with all of those filled in?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Yeah, I don't
So when
understand
you-
either.
When these are stripped back out so that they're usable, so they become an SMP, it's usable. This is after the imputation.
Right.
How do you know what is left?
How do you know which parts were imputed and which parts were from the next generation sequencing?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Bioinformatician would have access to that data, but as a genealogist, you wouldn't know.
Okay, that question would be for somebody different. Thank you.
That would be for someone.
After the SMP is created, then
So then you have a file that would look just like what you could get from one of the actual genealogy testing companies, and you can upload that if it's a forensic.
And
kit,
then you can use it over and over and over again.
Main databases, one of them is called Family Tree DNA, which in the trade we generally just call FT, right? And the other one is GenMatch. And there are a couple of smaller databases that are
very ancestry.
Ancestry will not let you upload a file into the database, nor will one create.
Basically,
There's no
your own.
process to do it. The only way to get into those two databases is by spinning it.
All right, on this slide, does this represent most of these companies that do the genetic analysis?
Those are all of the main companies. There are a few smaller ones, but they're really quite tiny, and often for those we don't even have decent estimates of how large they are.
By large, do you mean the number of people that have uploaded a profile or spin in a tube so one's created?
Yes.
There. And I think you let us know that law enforcement uses and can only use GenMatch and Family Tree DNA.
Per the terms of service of the companies, they are only allowed to use Family Tree DNA and GenMatch, and there are two smaller dedicated databases. One of them is called DNA Justice, which has, as of yesterday, about 500 people in it, and the other one is DNA Solved, which is owned by Optum, and I have no idea how many people they know.
Those two that you just talked about, can anybody use those, or are those only law enforcement can use those?
DNA Solves and Optum.
Yes.
Yes, those are only for law enforcement. A regular genealogist wouldn't have access to any output from those. You can voluntarily contribute your DNA, but then you can't use it for your own genealogy.
And GenMatch and Family Tree DNA, are those law enforcement only, or are those usable by others?
Those are usable by regular genealogists. Both of them existed long before the field of forensic genealogy.
All of this trying to explain to the judge,
They both allow law
hey,
enforcement to upload the kit.
this is the process. We need the information.
My heritage, I don't think we've talked a ton about that. I understand ancestry and 23 and we have to figure out.
Y'all, if I could just jump to the attorneys arguing, I would. But I can't. It's not available yet. They're still arguing.
No, so MyHeritage sells DNA tests, as does Family Tree DNA. So you can send a kit in. Those are cheek swabs, they're not stick. That's technical. But for both MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA, you could test directly with them, but you could also take your data file from one of the other companies and just upload the file. And it's just a text file.
Once
that
you
has
have that data file,
thousands and thousands
you can
of
put it
lines of
anywhere.
DNA data.
Once you have it
As a
mapped.
genealogist, you are working with somebody and you can take their profile and make it come freely and put it in MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA.
Yes.
You also put it in DIP.
Yes.
And law enforcement can only search.
That's what she
Family Tree DNA and
said.
GenMatch. Can they search your person?
If there's a DNA match to my person, they will see that match.
Okay. Does your person have to agree law enforcement to let that happen?
If we're talking about my adoptee. So it's complicated because the rules have changed continually over the past few years. As it currently stands at GenMatch, if we were to take a brand new kit, a brand new adoptee client, and upload their data to GenMatch, we would have to consent. The client would have to either consent or decline to consent to participate in law enforcement matching.
If they decline to participate and law enforcement searches GenMatch, then they should not see your clients. Is
They
that right?
should not see my client's data.
Correct.
Same with Family Tree DNA.
Family Tree DNA.
Oh, God, somebody
the
just
system
coughed
is
so
kind
loud.
of the inverse. If you add a kit to Family Tree DNA, they automatically opt you in. There is a way to opt yourself out, but you kind of have to know where to find it. It's not obvious.
So you're automatically opted in.
Again, a person can keep their information private, so it doesn't want it lost with the purchase.
They yes.
Family tree DNA. And my heritage is different law enforcement than that would.
My heritage explicitly prohibits it.
Okay, but what happened here? They didn't know what happened here. That's what they're trying to get to. But
No,
I don't know if we need
so
all
the
of this.
The total base at Family Tree DNA and the total database at GenMatch are both larger.
You have to opt out of some, not all.
So
It depends on
everyone
which
at Family
one.
Tree DNA has opted into law enforcement
Right.
matching. Not everyone at GenMatch has opted into law enforcement matching. And so the arrows are the gray bars are showing my estimates, and these are my personal estimates for the number of people in each of those databases who are officially accessible to law enforcement for matching.
And that's because those companies have two categories of
Yes.
And
Okay.
now to the last section where we're going to talk about the work products of genetic genealogy. What does that topic mean?
So these are the, if I have an adopted plant, this is what I would give the plant at the end of our.
This is the part
These are the products
that
I would give
matters.
them. And in basically everybody who's doing forensic genetic genealogy that I know of, except possibly the FBI, originally trained as a genetic genealogist. So this is what we are all used to giving to our plants.
What are we seeing on this first slide that you did here?
Okay, so those are two of the match lists. The one on the left is what a typical match list looks like at GenMatch. The one on the right is what a typical match list looks like at Family Tree DNA. For my plans, I will actually screenshot the matches and put that in the appendix to my report. I also copy all of the matches into another program because sometimes people will, they'll be in the match list of my adoptee and then they'll disappear. And so I like to have a record that, hey, when I uploaded this kit, I had these matches there. So even if they decide to delete their kit later, I still have a record that they shared so and so much DNA.
She's talking about her process for tracking this work that she does and builds it out. What we've seen from the motions is that the FBI told we're like in a game of telephone, told the prosecutors who told the court in their motion, who told the defense attorneys, and that's why they're fighting over this, that once they took the DNA that they had uploaded, the unknown DNA they had uploaded out of the system, then there's no more record of it. There's no more trace of it, and they didn't take screenshots of their work. They went in, did their work, pulled it back out of the database, and there's no record of it. So that's part of the fight here, is that the defense has been told by the prosecution that they didn't take screenshots of it. They didn't make these notes. They just went ahead and went, hey, this is what we're doing. And she's saying, no, this is the process of how I do it. And this is how you capture this information and build out a file. But it seems like during the investigation, the prosecution is saying that wasn't here and that wasn't done here. So there's nothing more to turn over from this initial stage because there's nothing else in the file because there's nothing else done. Was she the one who found Kohberger's match? No. She's the defense expert explaining how this all works and how she does it in her work for adoption information.
With my plan.
So she's an expert. That's not going to get cross-examined today because she was late disclosed,
It does look like a family tree, and it's anonymized or no real.
says the prosecution. The sun's going to get real weird.
Dr. Larkin, what are we seeing on this?
Maybe not.
So this is the family tree that I would have built for my client. And this would have attached to it documentation. So birth and death records, it would have census records if I was able to find the family in the census, immigration records.
It's a long day for Judge.
I often will link obituaries if I find them, if I find family photos. A lot of times you might find articles in the newspaper, and I will link everything that I find to this family tree that I then give the client.
Does that help verify for your client that the results you gave them were accurate?
Yes, it helps verify that all of the relationships that I'm reporting to them
I hate
are
this chair.
documented and yeah.
And it looks like you give them a copy of the descendant guidelines.
I do.
And you give them a copy of the laws. And a written report.
I do. If the client requests it, I will write a report.
If it's requested, she'll write a report, but that's
Other than
different.
those things that you give your clients, what would be available on the forensic side of the genetic genealogy?
Right, so So they should have the original DNA data file, whether it was microarray or the next generation sequencing. I don't need to give that to my client because they had that with them. There are some.
The reason the defense asked this, what should they have, is because the defense is arguing for stuff that doesn't exist, right? So the prosecution is saying, we don't have it. And the defense is saying, you need to turn it over. And the prosecution's like, what do you want me to turn over? We don't have it. And so this expert is saying, these are the things that you should have in going through this process. Now, where are they? That's what they're chatting about.
Complications when you're dealing with forensic DNA, because I didn't have a person spit a whole bunch of DNA into a tube. Sometimes you might have a mixture where more than one person is represented in the sample. So that needs to be analyzed, and there presumably would be documentation associated with that analysis, which is called deconvolution. DECONVOLUTION. If there was not
Deconvolution.
if there were.
Can you TLDR me this testimony for the deconvolution?
Sometimes, and not always, sometimes they will do what is called enrichment, where they're trying to increase the proportion of DNA.
Okay, that's better.
In that sample.
There we go.
If that process
There we
was
go.
done at the lab, there should be a record of it.
Or more comfy.
The bioinformatics that we talked about, so imputing any missing data and then stripping out all of the non-genealogical DNA points, all of those, there should be records of.
Oh, I think you have logins or kit numbers.
Right, so when
Yeah.
you.
Court has
once
finally
you've done
adjourned at, like,
done what we call the wet lab work, where you're
5 o'clock
working with the samples, and then you've done the computer
Pacific,
analyses.
6
When
whatever mountain.
The output file that mimics, it's like a fake microarray file, right? So it mimics the data that we would have gotten from a genealogy company. GenMatch and Family Tree DNA both charge law enforcement to use their database, and so there should be some sort of contractual agreement or receipts that you paid the company for the upload. And then there are logins, because for you to be able to see the matches, you have to log into that account. You have to have access. At Family Tree DNA, you have to log into that specific account. At GenMatch, I believe you can give access to a few different researchers, but they have to know what's called the KIT number, which is the unique identifying number.
She did say receipts.
When you said a fake microarray, it reminded me that when we talked about microarrays, you told us that those contain a ton of.
It's so hard to hear Ann Taylor.
This also has all of this?
Yes.
And because there's so many more, I guess, people, or kids, or profiles in that character, is that a place that somebody that can find a match might want to go?
Yes.
Dr. Larkin, thank you. I don't have any other questions, but don't leave quite yet. I'll pass it to you.
Oh, no, the prosecutor already said they weren't going to cross-examine. They're reserving their cross-examination.
This witness be excused. Okay, so if you're excused, you can stay here.
All right, so this expert is excused. The prosecutor said that they are not prepared to cross-examine because these experts were turned over late and their information was turned over late. The one person who was turned over earlier on was the professor. We saw that information turned over in an affidavit. So some of this stuff was not turned over. There are other parts to today's hearing. But what I think I'm going to do based on the hour is go to the next part that's available. We are not going to get to attorney argument today because court just wrapped for the day. And on average, it takes a couple of hours for these to get uploaded by the news agencies after court has wrapped. And it has been that way this entire case because they won't allow it to be streamed. Idaho won't allow these to go up until court is done. So the morning part gets put up at the lunch break and then the afternoon part doesn't get put up until after it's done. And of course the news clips those down. So there's one more witness. I want to see who this witness is and see if we need to go through all of this or if it's just more of the same. And then I'm going to answer questions. So let's just explore together if this is more of the same or if this is a witness that we actually need to need to listen to today, or if we need to just do this when court is done. So we will see, because here's what's going to happen today. We've got all the proceedings on the stays. Hopefully we'll get to see the attorneys argue on that when we cover this on Tuesday. The prosecution has reserved their cross-examination, so we're not going to get any decision on any of this because the prosecution's going to have to cross-examine this later. So we might be in a little bit of a holding pattern on some of this, which is difficult because we are running down the clock to trial in October, which if that's the case, Emily's going to have to pack a whole separate suitcase of tech to do this on the road. Because I've got fall is always busy travel-wise for me. I have no idea who this witness is. Let's see. Let's see if we need, otherwise we'll just go to Q&A.
I'm going to ask you a question and come back to the minute. What kind of work do you currently do?
User error, sorry.
I am an investigative genetic genealogist and also a woodworker.
Where's Rob? She is an investigative, what more? I need to rewind that. An investigative genealogist and a woodworker.
I'm going to ask you a question and come back to the
Ma'am?
minute. What kind of work do you currently do?
I am an investigative genetic genealogist and also a woodworker.
Investigative genetic genealogist and woodworker.
We're going to focus on your investigative genealogy today. But before we talk about your work history, I want to know a little bit more about your educational background. After high school, did you have more formal education?
I did. I went on to the College of San Mateo and received a degree and certificate in administration of justice and post-certification. And then I went on to San Jose State University and studied criminology and with a minor in sociology.
Did you graduate?
I did.
And was that with a bachelor's degree?
It was.
What year was that?
Really in.
Oh, I'm just fascinated.
I want to say.
I love knowing what people do.
During the college,
I don't remember.
it's been a few years since.
I just am bummed I didn't hear her name.
Did you take any courses in forensic genetics?
At that time, this did not even exist. And the courses only have started to recently come out. There is no current standard of certification for the work of investigative genetic genealogy.
That's an interesting thing. She says there is no particular certificate or training with regard to investigative genealogy. So there's not a formal course. This is kind of self-taught. So that's a very interesting thing. I'm wondering if that should be formalized at some point, but we'll just see. And again, this is someone who is testifying for the defense, the information that should be out there.
Is that newer than your college education degree?
Absolutely. This is a technique that only has come to light in the last 5 years.
You know, we're talking about the forensic investigative genetic genealogy.
Yes.
How did you get interested in it?
I really had no knowledge of it when I got involved. I had some health issues that I was going through and needed genetic testing. Unfortunately, my insurance wouldn't cover it, so I took direct-to-consumer DNA test and used the results to upload to a medical site. In the process of that, I found out that my father was not my father, and I then went on a mission to figure out how to identify who my biological father was.
Oh, T. Okay, ma'am.
You're personally involved in investors are very much self-taught.
100% self-taught. And this was a time in my life where I was going through cancer treatment. I had a very short prognosis of lifespan left and became incredibly depressed. And so once I identified my biological father, I then...
Okay, this feels much more like a percipient witness to a case for me than an expert witness to a case, because we're getting into the whole life story and now I'm invested. Like, I'm just like, wait, okay, what? She's like, look, so I had to do this thing and then I went the fuck down a rabbit hole and now I need to know the thing. I am now so invested and fascinated. I'm like, wait a second, tell me way more. So this feels much... it's just very different than than what we traditionally see with expert witnesses. Expert witnesses, we normally don't hear about their life, their background. We get their schooling and education, but we don't get into the rest of it. Where with witnesses to crimes, recipient witnesses, not spiritual witnesses, recipient witnesses, we get a little bit more. But now I'm invested. I was like, okay, now I need to know. She is self-taught, so I want to know how the defense. There's no closed captioning on this one, y'all. I'm sorry. I want to know how she is. Why are we here? I'm so curious. I'm fascinated. Now I just need answers.
Wanted to give back, and so I started a free online Facebook group for people who had gotten the same results or were adopted or donor conceived, and I started giving, finding their relatives for them.
So yes, she started a Facebook group for people that found out through DNA that their parents weren't their parents and was like, I can do this. Huh.
So at the time, I did not. So in 2018, in the spring, is when I started doing just genetic genealogy, which is the same concept essentially, but you're just doing it with adoptees, donor conceived and unknown parentage cases. I did a lot of online readings and reading scholarly articles, watching tutorials, just learning about the technique itself. I didn't have any involvement in investigative genetic genealogy until August 2019, when I was asked to join one of the companies that provides that service.
Okay.
No, they actually presume that you have to know what you're doing in order to be a part of the team, and so the presumption is made that you already have enough experience. I continued my own education and training by attending conferences, doing workshops, following other pioneers in the field that had successful case rates, and continued to just educate myself through what I could find on the internet, because at that time, certification programs, accreditation, any sort of courses, they didn't exist. Those are very, very recent things that have come out.
Interesting.
You mentioned that there were groups of people that you learned from and worked with. Did you check your work or have they checked your work as you learned?
Oh, absolutely. The first company, so I worked for two well-known companies in this industry, and then I have created since my own company.
That's why she's here.
The first company, you worked individually on cases, but it's a collaboration amongst the team. And so you keep each other up to date on what's going on. You ask for advice, guidance, help.
And this is, again, y'all, this is a discovery hearing. So this is not in front of a jury. The prosecution's not arguing that she's an expert, not an expert. She may never testify in front of the jury in this case. She is here to give the court more information about how these companies and processes work, and the fact that she has worked for multiple companies that does genetic genealogy and has her own history in genetic genealogy, and has her own company that deals with genetic genealogy, will allow her to tell the court, this is the behind the scenes, like this is the back end information that's available, because the court needs to know what information could be turned over. So this is a discovery hearing. So the witnesses at the discovery hearing might not be the witnesses we would see at trial, but now I'm like fascinated. And I want to know what woodworking she does. I'm now invested. You had me at my dad was not my dad.
Was more of a team structured way of working cases. And that was at the point when I began actually training all incoming volunteers that wanted to.
And then she started training people. Right. She learned how to do it because her insurance company was being stupid. And then she was like, I got this.
Just over 2.5 years.
And that's where you did investigative genetic genealogy and other genetic work.
Yes, with identifiers, I only did suspect cases, so only murder and rape, violent crime, cases. They did not do DOE cases at the time that I was working with them.
So you're talking about those kind of cases that you did, those were for law enforcement, you were identifying somebody that was unknown.
Yes.
Okay, and you wrote this check there while you did that for 2.5 years.
Yes.
Okay. The next place you worked, what was that?
The DNA DOE project.
What do you mean by that? You mentioned that.
DOE is an unidentified remains. The DNA DOE project specifically takes on adult DOE cases, not baby cases. So I work those cases on my own with my company.
She is saying DOE cases, unknown, DOE. So she's saying adult unknown cases, adult DOE cases. So she's talking about the kind of cases she has been invested in.
But it's identifying not suspects, only unidentified remains.
And you were not law enforcement there.
This might be why I like her. I am a purple-haired tattooed mom. I also understand getting pissed off and like doing an entire thing. So, like, I relate.
You're not doing anything for law enforcement there, so it's a little bit different, right?
So for both companies, we were working on behalf of law enforcement. We would contract these cases with law enforcement, but law enforcement was not in fact working the case. The genealogists were working the cases.
Okay. For law enforcement. Huh.
Yes.
All right, and so how long did you work at that?
I was with the DNA DOE project for about 2 years.
And is that where you did some teaching and training about genetic genealogy?
Yes.
From there, where did your career take you?
Well, I ended up opening my own company, but the DNA DOE project offered me the opportunity to be an intake specialist. So my primary role was when somebody was interested in doing this type of work and wanted to learn the technique, we would bring them on board. And I was the one who would teach them the process. So all new volunteers were on a specific case that was run by me, and I would not only train them, but also check their work, make sure that they were.
She's probably run hundreds and hundreds of cases then.
The proper person that they put in the tree. I also, the University of New Haven had also started a forensic investigative genetic genealogy course that you could take that had a practicum at the end of it.
Oh, I think Court went over by like an hour today.
The project was the first organization that took on a cohort of students. The first year of this course that was offered, it was it wasn't fine-tuned. So the students that I
it wasn't fine-tuned, was gentle.
In total, they really had very limited knowledge of the technique, of the meaning of anything really. And so I would spend hours training them, and at the end of 7 weeks, I led them to a solve of a case.
You were trusted with me?
Yes, I was.
Do you know roughly how many law enforcement forensic investigative genetic genealogy cases you worked?
I have worked just for law enforcement cases probably around 25 to 30.
And the DOE project, how many of those kinds of cases?
So that would include all cases.
The 25 includes the DOE cases?
Yeah, it's about 25 to 30. It would encompass any case that I have worked that is law enforcement case, not including the cases that were unknown parentage cases.
And the other kinds of genetic genealogy, how many times have you worked with cases in genetic genealogy other than that?
How many cases? Minimum 25. I still have people every day who, it depends. Some people just don't know what any of this means. And so it's as simple as just looking at their matches and explaining it to them, and they do it on their own. But actually working cases, probably another 25 to 30 that are just unknown parentage cases.
And have you testified before in court?
I have not.
Interesting.
Let's talk about what did you get. How did you get involved in one of these?
Has never testified before.
I was contacted by defense. Well, I take that back. I was contacted by somebody in this field. I don't know if I can say who it was or if it's relevant.
She's like, I don't know what to say.
I'm willing to talk to the defense. And I I agreed, and I had that, it's a Zoom call in which I was asked, basically just to explain the process in which I go through from start to finish on a case. So what is, from when law enforcement contacts me to when I provide the investigative lead back to law enforcement, what is the process? And that was the extent of my involvement at the time.
Because that's the process they need to understand. That makes total sense. Well, that makes sense.
What's your first step?
So it's a complex, it's very complex. Essentially, law enforcement will contact me and say they have a case that they are unable to solve and they would like to, they like my services. I first
They want your help.
What type of case is it? And are there any, what is the DNA that is involved? Do we have to extract the DNA? Have you already extracted the DNA? So there's a lot of preliminary questions. Once we establish that and they agree to take, have me take on the case, I have them set up to ship the sample, whether it be something that needs to be extracted to the lab that does that, or DNA that's already been extracted that needs to be sequenced. The law enforcement agency will then send that to a third-party forensic lab. At that point,
And then once it's sequenced, then what?
The sample, I essentially take over the case until I provide the genetic lead back to, or the investigative lead back to the agency. In the meantime, I will stay in contact with usually the detective and provide updates on, did it pass quality check in the lab? It's being sequenced now. The data file has been complete. It's gone through bioinformatics. I've uploaded it, to GEDmatch. Do you want to upload to FTDNA, family tree DNA, because there's an additional charge for that? And so I keep them kind of abreast as to what's going on. But essentially, the case is mine. It's in my control until I am done.
Yeah, she seems like the Dr. House for DNA.
During those communications with law enforcement, do you take their direction, and if they say stop working, you stop working?
Absolutely. The case belongs to them. It is not my case. It is not my data. I am providing service for them. The only request that I have is they not have another company work the case at the same time, because it's just a lot of work that you go through. But I am at their direction. Yeah, I don't.
So it's not as easy as just getting a profile and sticking it in your computer and having it.
Oh, absolutely not. I've had cases that have taken me 14 months to solve.
Why, you mentioned you use GEDmatch for family tree DNA, but there's an extra fee involved in that. Can you explain that a little more?
So there's only, there's many direct-to-consumer databases, Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, all of which you can order from the company a DNA test, spit in the tube, and send it off back to the company. Ancestry and 23andMe allow you to download your data and upload free to these other sites as a normal consumer. Law enforcement cases, however, are only permitted to be uploaded into Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch for a fee. GEDmatch, however, is not a direct-to-consumer testing site. It is only a database where people take their test results from the company in which they tested and upload this site to the site to get more matches, essentially, or higher, closer relatives, higher matches.
This is what everybody else has been trying to explain, and she has explained it the best, that there are only two databases that law enforcement is allowed to upload the profiles into. You get the DNA, you get it sequenced, you get the profile, you upload it into the database, and blah, 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 blah. She has explained that so much easier than all of the other witnesses. So law enforcement's allowed to use these two. This is what we use. There's a fee for that. This is it. I really appreciate her testimony. It's been the clearest testimony for the purposes of court today. But this is clear that this is something she talks about all of the time. Like, all of the time.
Does law enforcement have access to all of GEDmatch?
If properly uploaded, there's a fee that you must pay. You must upload through a separate database than the one in which consumers upload through. You must pay the fee, and you, depending on the case, may be limited on the matches that you are able to see.
Why is that?
The terms of service have changed several times since
I like
the
Gabriella a
state
lot.
killer case came out, in which investigative genetic genealogy became very popular. It used to have everyone opted in, then it GEDmatch opted everybody out, and you had to choose to opt in to law enforcement match as a consumer. Then it decided to automatically opt DOE cases in. So to break that down, if you were to take a DNA test of ancestry and want to upload to
I
GEDmatch,
just took a
when you
DNA
input
test.
that
Turns
file,
out, wait,
it's going to ask you, do you
are we allowed to
consent
use?
to law
No,
enforcement
yes.
matching? And if you hit no, and I am working violent crime non-DOE case, I should not be able to see that you are a match to my unknown DNA contributor.
Okay, that makes sense.
You said should not.
Should not.
Does it happen anyway?
It
Ma'am?
does. It has.
And is that because there's a problem with GEDmatch? It's just if you upload it and all of a sudden these things that shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
do?
why does it happen? Do you know why it happens? Can you answer that question?
There are a lot of tools that are available in GEDmatch. These tools allow you to make comparisons of two or more people and how they relate to each other and share DNA. One of these tools allows you to compare many matches, not only against your DNA profile that you're working, but also against all of their matches to see if their matches match each other. When you utilize this tool, there is a feature that you can edit the list of kits that are originally selected.
What does that mean?
Yeah, can you explain that? She is trying to be very
So
careful.
When you upload your profile,
I don't think she likes this at all.
it takes about 24, 48, 72 hours max to batch and tokenize in the system. It then produces a list of matches, okay? And these matches are biological relatives to the unknown DNA contributor. We don't know right away what relationship they are, but they are all biological relatives, okay? One of the tools is called the matrix tool. And what the matrix does is it compares the match, the DNA profile against a specified number of the profile's matches. So for example, if I run the profile's kit number, they're all given a kit number. If I run the profile's kit number and I compare it to 100 of the profile's top matches, it will in turn compare the profile to all of the matches and all of the matches to everyone on that list of 100 people. Okay?
Let me see what you're saying. Let me just make
Huh.
sure. So you have one person, you get a list of their matches, but this tool also gives you a list of those matches.
No.
So it's a multi-step process. So initially, if I am putting my
Unknown
subject's DNA,
matches,
I don't know what
matches to
I put
matches.
their kit number in. You get a kit number after you upload the data. Okay. I put the kit number in. I run a tool called one-to-many, and it's going to show the top 500 matches that this subject has.
I think a lot of people are in that boat. Teach traps.
The
Teach
manipulation
terps.
tool, the loophole. You would then go click the top match and run their matches. So the top match of your subject's top match, you would run their matches, okay? Once you run their matches, there is a tool that allows you to edit that list of matches. So we're looking at the matches of the subject's top relative, not the subject's matches, right? The
Huh.
edit kit list, if you put the subject's kit number into this tool that you're going to now analyze, these matches, it tricks the system and allows you to see matches that you wouldn't have seen if you ran your initial match list.
So there's either a bug or an exploit, depending on how you look at it.
Those matches that are revealed are only matches that have been opted out.
Well, that is only the one that's supposed to be.
What?
Only the ones. If
She
so
just
if
said,
you see that the subject matches one,
she just said, once you do that, they only show you matches that have been opted out. So if that is accurate, now they're talking about an exploit in the program that law enforcement might be using where it's a problem. It should be only matches that are opted in, but she didn't say opted in. She said opted out. Let's see if she clarifies. Because that could be a problem here, depending on whether the matches with Kohberger were opted in or opted out. That's an issue. Whew.
of these people, because again, you're not looking at your subject's matches. You're looking at that person's top cousin, let's say, that top cousin's matches, right? When you put your subject's kit number in there, you're going to see now his kit, her kit, compared against the matches of their top match. When you find, you then scroll down and you look, oh, here's a match for 100 centimorgans. You go back to your screen where you have your list of your subject matches and you say, I don't have a match with 100 centimorgans. That proves that that person has opted out of law enforcement matching, but I'm still able to see them.
And so that's a way to use this tool to get past what law enforcement is supposed to do.
That's calling for an opinion that she probably can't give. It's a work. It sounds like an exploit or a workaround.
I'm sorry.
Because you're asking for a legal
It is
opinion that you can't give.
a
That's
tool
not
that
your
is
fault.
Provided in the database that essentially allows you to see things that you're not supposed to see.
Oh yeah, she meant
And
opted
As a
out.
result of
That's a
seeing
problem.
those things, you're then using that match
To get more
find
information.
Who, yeah, to identify your subject. So you're violating the terms of service by seeing these matches.
You're violating the terms of service by using the tools within the program.
How about family tree DNA? That's the other
This
one.
sounds like an issue within the program.
There's two things that I'm aware of in family tree DNA.
That's
One is
a problem.
not paying to upload. So there's very strict parameters when it comes to law enforcement kits. One of the parameters is if you as a consumer are a match to a law enforcement kit, you cannot see that kit as a regular consumer. So law enforcement kits can see everybody in the database that have opted in. Now Family Tree also has an opt-in out feature that is not the same as GEDmatch.
Oh,
You have
excuse
to go
me.
into the settings and find it and toggle whether or not you choose to opt in or out. Many people are unaware of this. Another instance is uploading the data as if you were a consumer. You bypass the fees that you're supposed to pay to Family Tree DNA for a law enforcement kit, whereas a consumer it's free. And you also get full access to the database, including matches that have opted out.
Does this happen?
Wait a second.
Yes.
So she's saying that if law enforcement uploads a profile and says that they are a consumer, then they have access to the full database if they go in as a consumer instead of going in as law enforcement. If you go in as law enforcement, flag it as law enforcement, pay for it as law enforcement, then there are certain things that are blocked. She is saying if law enforcement takes a profile, creates takes a DNA profile, creates a username, and goes in as a consumer, then there are things that are opted out for law enforcement that consumers can see, which is also a problem. So if law enforcement's violating the terms of use, then this can be a problem, which is why Kohberger's team is trying to get the information about what law enforcement did here. So that's what we're getting to.
And I found a case where genetic genealogy is being utilized by law enforcement. And I want to know if they follow the protocols and rules. Do I need the genetic genealogy information that like you use as a
Well, that's a legal conclusion, ma'am.
that information, so I don't know.
If you wanted to know what the process was, whether or not there was work product, if you wanted to verify how did you come to your conclusion, absolutely.
How about if I wanted to know what the rules are?
Okay, but
You would need the data.
you would need their
You need to
data.
see the data.
This is second one, I know.
Are we almost done with this witness then?
You have a question about another database, MyHeritage. Is that one that law enforcement uses?
Many in this industry have been known to upload to MyHeritage. Essentially, these databases, you're only bound by the terms of service. And there are workarounds in every one of the databases that somebody knows about and has told you about, or you yourself have tried.
So she is saying in the databases, you are bound by their terms of service, but there are workarounds for the terms of service.
There's really no
Interesting.
justification for it. You think you're doing the right thing, you want to help, and
Oh, this sounds like something she's done too then.
There's a lot
Huh.
of information in genetic genealogy.
there is. It is a very tedious process. There is a lot of time, effort, and work that goes into it. In the end, what I provide to law enforcement is an investigative lead, and it is up to the agency to then take over their case and confirm that my lead is in fact correct.
How does law enforcement upload to MyHeritage?
So the upload to these databases is, you go to the website, you create a free account, you take the data file, you hit upload,
Huh.
and voila, you've got now a list of matches. It's the same as a regular consumer would do in both MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA. GEDmatch law enforcement uploads now through a separate portal called GEDmatch Pro. But there are instances of people doing work on behalf of law enforcement uploading to GEDmatch through the consumer portal.
So if law enforcement is calling somebody like her saying, hey, can you research this and then provide us with investigative leads, then they're a private citizen. So do they have to upload it as law enforcement? These are some gray zones that the law is going to have to fill in. And that is why this is coming up for hearing. This is a fight that is going on, not just in this court, but in other courts between defense attorneys and prosecutors and law enforcement, trying to figure out where the boundaries are for all of this. And one of the grounds where that gets fought is in a case where the consequences are so significant, like this case where DNA is a big factor in the case, but this is also a death penalty case. So this is interesting to see her looking a bit torn to testify about the fact that there are these areas where if you don't upload it this way, then is it going to be blocked? Is it not going to be blocked? And what did law enforcement do in this case? And is what law enforcement did against terms of service? If it's against terms of service, is that a Fourth Amendment violation? Is it not? should that part of the DNA be pulled out of the analysis? Then how do they get to knowing it's Kohberger or not? It's a very interesting legal problem. This is a very interesting legal problem. And it's not one that's going to have easy answers. And I see you guys in the chat saying that you feel torn. I completely understand. I also see you saying hi to Peter. I didn't see Peter. Hi, Peter. I didn't see Peter, but hello. Court's still not done. This is a very long day. There you go. Hello. This is just wild today. Have fun playing pickleball. So these are the types of questions that need to get answered. And these are the cases where those things get tested out, because when Kohberger goes to trial, if he is convicted, they will come back around on this on appeal. And these are the types of cases where law gets made.
As if it were a consumer good.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I'm not sure if you'll talk to your judge.
Okay, and she's done. All right, so we're going to get to... She looked very uncomfortable with some of that because, again, this is her field. She doesn't want to blow up her field. And if people are doing things that violate terms of service, is it a terms of service violation? Is it a bigger violation? And that's the question here. She was very honest, and she doesn't seem thrilled about it. But we don't know what happened in this case, which is what we're going to have to sort out. What did law enforcement do in this case? So let's see the end of this clip. It looks like there's another few minutes, and then we are going to cut this and go through questions, and then I have got to jump. So, and my mom is texting me. Okay, there's no way we're getting to another witness. Oh, this is just frozen screen. Okay, perfect. That's just frozen screen. So we're done with that. We're not going to get to the last witness because it's not up yet from everything that I've seen. And there are still hours of hearing left that are not available yet on the internet. So we will get to doing all of that next week when I am back in my setup with my normal everything. We're going to get to... Sorry, I'm touching the table and it's mad at me. We are going to get to your questions. I'm going to take these off since we're done with the court stuff. So let us get to Q&A. Hopefully that's not too loud, taking those off. And now we've gotten to the heart of the issue with that last witness, really, because how DNA is serialed and stuff like that isn't, for this court's purposes, and even for our purposes, figuring out what the court's going to do, isn't really anything we need to know. It's like, okay, yeah, they do all this stuff, but what is the problem here? That last witness got to the very heart of what is the problem here. What is the problem for the court? What is the problem for the defense? And what does law enforcement have to deal with? So that was the heart of it. Jen Gerard, good to see you. I clearly have issues. Totally forgot we were live. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, we're here. We're here for hours, So does that mean there's a possibility that the DNA will be thrown out? I don't think we're there yet. We're not there yet. So I don't think we're there yet. Is there a possibility evidence can get suppressed? There's always a possibility evidence can get suppressed. But what I would want to know, first of all, is if there is a problem, did it taint everything else? And what else led them to arresting Kohberger? Because once they arrested Kohberger, they matched the DNA to him. It's the step before getting to the arrest that they are attacking. And once they got to Kohberger's parents' house, then they tested the dad's DNA. But what led them to Kohberger? Was it just the DNA? Was it the vehicle? There's more information here. So a lot of you are going to be like, what happens next? We don't have enough information for what happens next. Cross-examination hasn't happened on these witnesses. We haven't heard argument. So we're not there yet. We are in the middle of a process. The defense is hoping to get as much of it thrown out as they can. The prosecution is going to fight for it. Can I give you this is what's likely going to happen? No, we're not done with this hearing yet. So I cannot give you that because we're not done. Question, does the defendant need to be there? I mean, in theory, no, the defendant doesn't have to be there for these hearings, but most defendants want to be there to see what's going on. If this info yeets the IGG, how would that impact the match from Bryan Kohberger from the arrest on the sheath? I think we just talked about it. It depends on what the other probable cause is. You would look at, if the DNA comes out, what other probable cause is there to arrest him, and the rest of it. So there would still be more. I'm definitely going to want to read the transcript. Yep, that was a lot. She just blew up a lot of illegal cases. If they can prove it, this could be a big problem. So yeah, and she said, this is what's happening. And this is what's happening. I think there will be pressure on the companies to fix it. And I think other defense attorneys will raise these issues in court more and more and more until we see the rules narrowed down, and law enforcement generally doesn't change their policies and practices until evidence starts getting kicked out of court. And then they're like, oh, we can't do it that way. Marianne said, want to thank EDB and the awesome community, inspired me to seek help and learn my ADHD actually is autism. Thank you for being a good place online. We try to be good neighbors. It's why we have the rules that we do and are kind and compassionate. And I know that understanding yourself is going to be a whole new world. And so congratulations. Match is no longer a word. Yes, it started sounding squishy and not working. This happened to me, found out my dad wasn't my dad. Chrissy, that must have been very disorienting. And I hope that things have gone well. Mayor said, Emily, I saw you in the Depp versus Heard doc on Netflix and I was screaming. I have heard that I am in it. I have seen screenshots. I have not had a chance to watch it because I have been so busy. So busy. After her reluctant testimony, what law enforcement office would hire her? I don't know. We'll see what happens. This is why laws are being made and you have to sign stuff down. Yep. And that's how things change. So Mama Bear said his car, his phone, his digital imprint, the media made up this idea that the genealogy was used. I personally would need to go, and I've been traveling and I had drinks at lunch with Pete and Jen. I would need to go back through the probable cause affidavit, and there's more information I would want. There's more information I would want before I make a more definitive statement on that. Question, if the company used the program as designed and it's a known problem, shouldn't it hurt the prosecution? Could. So it really just depends. Privacy is one thing, but what if KDNA on the knife, that should be what matters. Process matters. Your constitutional rights matter. Following the Fourth Amendment matters. So this is the problem. If law enforcement does something illegal at the beginning and then they arrest somebody and then match the DNA, you can't just go, well, now it matches, obviously we're right. You have to address things that happen at the beginning. So if there are issues there, you have to address the issues at the beginning. If those issues are what led them to Kohberger, you can't just break a bunch of rules and constitutional rights and all the rest of it and then go, but see, we were right. That's not how it works. So even if you get the right person, if you do it the wrong way, then it can get thrown out. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here. I'm not saying it's what not. I'm saying that that's what the defense is trying to attack. And that's why they are dogged in arguing that we need transparency in how law enforcement got to this information, how they built the family trees, how they uploaded things to the databases. We need to know that they did it right if that's what they used to target Kohberger as a suspect in this case from an unknown. But if there's more that was used to target him, you could end up with the court saying, and this is possible too, with the court saying, yes, they shouldn't have done it that way. Yes, the IGG can't come in, but all this other stuff is still in, and then we're fine. And Midwest Girl asked, but did law enforcement break the rules? We don't know. And the defense doesn't know. And the defense is saying, we need the rest of the information so that we can then argue it one way or the other. And that's where we're at. If it gets thrown out, does that mean the case might get dropped? Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Because if there's more, you can have error that's harmless. So if there's more, then you can say, if you take this out, then what? So we'll see what happens. And Lowly, I need to go back through and look at the probable cause. If none of that was used, then even if they found out that law enforcement or the court determined that law enforcement did get the IGG but didn't do it properly or did it in violation of the terms of service, it might be error but harmless, and then it doesn't matter if the arrest warrant's based and predicated on other things. So that's why I said it can be that it's a problem, but it's a problem that doesn't matter. It can be that it's a problem that does matter. We're not done yet. There's no way this is going to trial in 6 weeks. The defense keeps pushing for stays, but not waiving time. They're trying to have their cake and eating it too. I think the defense is going to end up waiving time at some point. That's my gut. That's my gut. They might not. I might be totally wrong on that, but they keep pushing for stays. I think the defense needs more time. And at the end of the day, if the defense needs more time to do their job, then they will tell their client that. Can the judge check with the prosecution? Can the judge check what the prosecution has and confirm if there is or is not more information? The prosecution hasn't said we need the court to look at it because we don't think we have to turn it over. They've said we've turned it all over. If the prosecution has turned over everything they have, I believe that they've turned over everything they have. If law enforcement hasn't given everything to the prosecution, that's where the problem is. And that's something that the court is going to have to deal with all these attorneys. Fun fact, human genome laid out is 205 centimeters long. I don't have any perception of how long that is, but it seems long. Aaron says, I don't think she knows what they did here. Yes. Ann Taylor wants the information to try to unwind what law enforcement did so she can argue it. That's part of the issue. As someone with genetic experience, that's a big effing problem. Right. She doesn't know exactly what was done. I absolutely agree with you. Thanks for streaming today. Helps keep in mind of the fire threatening our city limits and out of control wildfires a town over here in central BC. Stay safe. Wildfires are unpredictable. Always have an alert system. I mean, weather. Lily says, I love learning things about DNA. It's not legal to use 23andMe and 123 databases with participants. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, Lily, but thank you. My brain can't process it. I apologize. Sassily. I think it's like Ashley, but with sass, and my brain can't combine those. So Sassily says, I found out my dad was not my bio dad through 23andMe, zero clue before, had to learn all the DNA stuff then to believe the results. Fair enough. And that has happened to not just numerous people in the chat, but numerous people I've engaged with online. Isn't this just splitting hairs? They found it, they matched it, nothing nefarious. It's not just splitting hairs. They need to know what law enforcement did at the beginning stages because, well, the Constitution requires them to do what's right. And I think that looking to get a result, and this is something that frustrates me online, getting a result by any means necessary is not the way that prosecutions should be carried out. We see a lot more of that in civil law, a lot more of the like, well, you know, it might be kind of gray zone, it might be shady, it might be this, it might be that, but whatever, any means necessary. We see a lot more of that type of fighting in civil. I don't agree with any means necessary in criminal because that's not doing justice and that's not upholding the Constitution. Any means necessary allows for a lot of looking the other way over things that shouldn't be done. And that's part of what this last witness was saying on the stand is you justify it by thinking like, oh, well, we're doing this or we're doing that. And justifying it is not okay. Like when you have to justify, well, you know, it's for the greater good or whatever, you end up in a situation, or you could end up in a situation where you're justifying bowling through rights and safeguards that should not happen. So with due process and our Constitution, it's a safeguard against any means necessary. And that's important. That really upholds our entire system of justice. So look, if they can't do it right, then you can't prosecute somebody. Like, you have to be able to do it with upholding the Fourth Amendment. And a lot of people go unprosecuted because they just don't have enough. Even when you get law enforcement being like, pretty sure that person did it. Well, pretty sure is not beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's not going to get you to a prosecution. So you can't, and this is Philip Kane, that's exactly it. You can't get to an ends justify the means. The process has to be done properly, which I know can sound naive, especially for those of you that are super cynical. I get it, but it has to be that way, or our system means nothing. Wait, McLinda said, EDB, did you see your former babysitter? Your former babysitter's husband is in the chat. I did not see that. I somehow missed it. Hi. Just DM me. I didn't see that. So let's see. Wait, where did it go? Hey, before you go, my wife used to babysit for you. Hello, Greg. Tell your wife to go ahead and DM me. Good to see you in the chat. I didn't see that. One of my former babysitters introduced me to my husband. That's a story for a different day. What Remains is a great podcast about genetic genealogy and crime solving. There you go. Anyway, what we've learned today is that Emily is not an ends justify the means girl. Because that's never going to fly with me. And it's never going to fly with me. Like this whole, like, well, they deserve it. And now I'm not talking about criminal prosecution or criminal law so much, but I'm talking about, we see this online so much with like, well, they deserve it. It's not okay. It's not okay. Emily, the light is washing you out, I'm sure, which makes it hard to lip read. I'm sorry. Is there anything you can do about it? Music to my soul. I am so sorry. I am traveling, and I am at the mercy of the window that I am sitting in front of. Idaho, the law nerds are invading. You're welcome. There was a lot of us. Motion for slow mode. We were on slow mode. Thank God for the text crew. You're welcome. We have a new solution coming. So if you guys aren't on Law Nerd Alert will get you there. We have a faster solution coming to keep you guys all in the loop. And the first people to know about it will be our members and then our Law Nerd Alerts. So if you're not signed up, lawneralert.com, your email, and we will keep you in the loop, especially with cases that are moving quickly like this. Can the defense ask the prosecution to resend something? My brain literally just stopped on live stream. Resend something specific if the prosecution claims they gave everything already and the defense can't find it. I mean, yeah, you generally bait stamp something and are like, it's bait stamp number, whatever. But the prosecution also gave them, 50 terabytes of data or something insane. So this is a case with a lot of information. And if all of that, you need discovery receipts and there's generally a portal where you can see what's been uploaded in the portal and stuff like that. So you should work together collegially. But if they're like, can you tell me exactly what page it's on? It's like, it is not my job. It is not my job to go find what page this is on for you if you don't know. So it just depends on the circumstance. Can the defense have the DNA evidence thrown out if they're not given discovery? That could be a discovery sanction of what they used to get the conclusion it was Kohberger. That could be the judge's remedy for that is like, okay, well, fine. It gets tossed then. But the DNA they're fighting over is not the DNA the prosecution's going to use at trial. It's different. It's Dr. Jade said, question, witchy law nerd vet here, hypothetical question. Is the prosecution taking the PD's motions too personally? I don't think so. Hypothetically, is internalized misogyny manifesting as fragile male ego? I don't have any answers. I just have questions. It's Dr. Jade. It is very late in the day. I have no idea. I don't think the prosecution's taking it too personally at this point. I think the prosecution is showing frustration with we've already tread this ground, so we are now just repeating ourselves. And I think that's the frustration of we're just repeating ourselves at this point. Question, when the trial starts, will the stream be live or released after like this? I have no idea. My guess is it'll be released after like this, and that will suck. Won't BK come across this guy or his papers during his schooling? I have no idea if he would have known that doctor or not. No idea what he would have been studying. He didn't get very far in his PhD program before all of this, so I have no idea. If law enforcement went through the databases against their terms, does that mean the prosecution can't use the DNA at trial? Not necessarily. We're not at that point yet. The defense needs to know what was done so that they can even start arguing whether it should be excluded or not. So we'll see what happens. Any chance BK did this just to make the argument about familial DNA? Is the question, is there any chance Bryan Kohberger committed 4 murders so that he could argue to change the laws with regards to familial DNA? Probably not. Is the question, did the lawyers bring this motion to fight familial DNA because it's an ongoing fight in the courts between defense and prosecution and law enforcement? Yes, but I don't think that has much to do with Kohberger individually. It has more to do with this case. Do stays shape the defense case like stays in a girdle shape the body? Yes. Stays in the defense case allow you to have it both ways. So I get the prosecutor's frustration, but after that last expert, I get the defense position too. Exactly. The defense is saying there's some things we just can't turn over. We don't have them. And the defense is saying, but this is a problem. This is a problem. So we just need to see what happens. We just need to see what happens. We need to see the cross-examination. We need to see the lawyer's arguments. We're just going to watch it unfold. I'm not going to try to tell the future here because I don't know what the judge is going to do. We don't have all the info. Finally hit alive. Yay, just wanted to say hi. You're welcome. Love from an Aussie law student going into prosecution. Good for you. Have emotional support. It's a tough job. The judge set up dates. Sounds like they're going to court on 10/2. Why say this? Sorry, just confused. They are set for trial on 10/2, but they need to start setting cutoff dates. So there was a motion in here for a scheduling order to set cutoff dates because they are running real close to their cutoff dates. And so that the court was asked for a scheduling order. So thank you for the information, Jen. I appreciate it. I'm already drinking. Join the fun. I have some more travel I have to do today. Have they stated how long the trial will be? They set it out for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks is what they set court time aside for, but that was a million years ago. They better get improved audio for doing this whole trial. Oh my God. Well, they'll wire the courtroom hopefully better, much better. So prosecutor wants to make sure there's no mistrial like in Mississippi. I don't know the Mississippi case, Judy, you got this. Everyone should want to make sure, including the judge, that this doesn't come back on appeal or mistrial. What would happen if prosecution suddenly came up with evidence not in discovery? It generally will be kept out, though sometimes it can cause a mistrial. Sometimes there can be sanctions. It depends on the circumstances. But that does happen in cases. But really depends. We need a code red. I can't do a code red. I'm sorry. I cannot do a code red. All I can do truly right now is log off and get going because I've got some other obligations. When is the trial? It's supposed to start in October. I think October 2nd is their first trial date, but they were doing scheduling orders today and they're going to take time to pick a jury. So that's what that is. I think the audio is a court TV. Court TV will be granted the pool cameras. They've generally been granted the pool cameras in this case. So court TV will have to wire in the courtroom the best they can to deal with the judge stuff. Jessica, it's so good to see you. Thank you for the stickers and pictures. You're welcome. It's so good to see you in the chat. It was so much fun running into you at the Nintendo booth at VidCon. Your booth was one of my favorites. It was so good. All right, y'all. Are we doing more hearings on Tuesday or just recaps? I don't know, Laura. I don't know what we're doing. It just depends on what comes out. I don't know when I'm going to have time to record quick bits. I have some scheduling I have to deal with. I don't know what we're doing on Tuesday. It's really just going to depend on how many more hours of testimony we have and how much lawyer argument we have. We need to talk about Brittany's divorce on Tuesday. We have some other stuff we need to talk about on Tuesday. We're just gonna do our best. So that's where we're at. We're just gonna do our best. So with all of that, y'all stay safe with your wild weather. Don't flood, don't fire, don't spin, all of the things. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a law nerd. I appreciate you. This question caught my eye. Bowling with cotton balls. It was the screen name that caught my eye because I was like, that's a curious thing. I wonder how that would work. Is the prosecution sweating? Everyone's exhausted because this is a lot of information on a very short timeline. Everyone is exhausted. So no, I don't think they're sweating. I think they are feeling the time pressure and the time crunch. I think they are tired. I think they are trying to prep for trial, and this is a lot of pretrial litigation. And so they are juggling all, and everyone is probably stretched too thin. So that's my take on it at the moment. But law nerds, thank you for being here. Thank you for being law nerds. At almost 3 hours, I think that last witness for the day was our best summary of the day for sure. And we'll see what the judge does. We're not going to get a ruling on this today because, well, we haven't had cross-examination on it yet. So there's going to be more filings. We'll go over the filings on Tuesday, and we will just handle it. So law nerds, be safe. I will see you when I am back in my studio after travel. I hope the sound wasn't too bad. I know it kind of sucked, but at least we got to do a stream, right? All right. I'll see y'all later. Bye, law nerds.
You can find all the Law Nerd goodies at lawnerdshop.com. Connect with me on social media at the Emily D. Baker. And don't forget to check out my podcasts, The Emily Show, and the new podcast, Quick Bits, summarizing everything I talk about on my Tuesday and Thursday live streams. You know, when you only have time for just the quick bits.